Before written history, long before empires rose and fell, humans were shaping stone with a precision that still defies explanation. Across deserts, plains, and hidden valleys, colossal structures emerge, measured, aligned, and constructed with mathematical accuracy that challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric life. Who were the minds capable of such feats? What knowledge guided their hands, and why have these silent monuments endured for millennia? From the windswept ruins in Palestine to forgotten sites scattered across the ancient world, a story of ingenuity and mystery awaits. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Nestled in the volcanic landscapes of southwestern Victoria, Australia, the Budj aquaculture system stretches quietly across the land, almost invisible to the untrained eye. Rivers wind through ancient lava flows, their channels carefully altered, dammed, and directed to create a complex network of ponds, channels, and weirs. From above, the intricate design resembles a subtle patchwork etched into the earth by human hands tens of thousands of years ago. It is a system both practical and profound, demonstrating a deep understanding of hydrology, ecology, and the seasonal rhythms of eels, the lifeblood of the Gunditj Mara people who have called this land home for millennia. Archaeologists estimate that this network of stone channels and ponds could date back as far as 6,600 BC, making it one of the oldest known engineered aquaculture systems in the world. For generations, the Gunditj Mara meticulously managed the water, constructing barriers and carefully regulating flow to trap and harvest eels in predictable cycles. Each stone wall and channel reflects not just utility, but an intimate knowledge of the landscape, a synchronization with nature that few modern societies could match. Yet, the more we uncover, the more questions arise. How did such sophisticated engineering emerge in a prehistoric context? The scale of Budj, its durability, and its precise alignment suggest planning, collaboration, and knowledge passed down through countless generations. But there are gaps in our understanding, gaps that leave room for speculation. Could this system represent a form of prehistoric urban planning? A society far more organized and technologically adept than we typically imagine for this period? Or was it a gradual evolution of trial, observation, and adaptation, refined over centuries to perfection? There is also the enigma of its cultural significance. While we can trace its function in sustaining the Gunditj Mara people, the design hints at more than mere survival. The placement of ponds, the flow of water, and the integration with surrounding lava channels suggest a worldview in which humans and landscape were deeply entwined. Was Budj simply a food source, or also a spiritual or social anchor, a place where knowledge, tradition, and identity converged? Some researchers note alignments and patterns that appear almost ritualistic, inviting interpretations that go beyond practical necessity. Exploring the area on foot, one is struck by the sense of scale and intent. Stones stacked to direct water are weathered yet resolute, channels curve with deliberate elegance, and the landscape itself seems to guide movement. In some locations, the remnants of ancient walls and ponds are obscured by vegetation, leaving only subtle depressions or changes in soil color as hints of what once existed. It is a system that demands observation and reflection, asking those who study it to slow down, to notice the harmony between water, stone, and human effort. And yet, despite decades of research, mysteries remain. How did the Gunditj Mara coordinate labor on such a vast project? What tools, knowledge, and social structures made it possible to construct a network capable of sustaining entire communities for thousands of years? Even today, parts of the system are still active. Eels continue to migrate along channels designed millennia ago, and the land seems to whisper of wisdom that exceeds our understanding. In contemplating Budj Bim, one cannot help but wonder what else might be hidden beneath the volcanic soil, or buried in the subtle curves of a channel long forgotten. Could there be knowledge, lost stories, or even undiscovered structures that would transform our understanding of prehistoric life? The answers may lie in plain sight, waiting for patient eyes and careful minds to uncover them. Reminders that history is not just a record of what we know, but a landscape of questions yet to be answered. From the wet, volcanic lands of southwestern Australia, our journey now shifts thousands of kilometers to the vast, arid expanse of the Nubian desert, to a place that seems almost suspended in time. Nabta Playa. Here, in a shallow basin that fills seasonally with rain, the desert holds secrets older than recorded history. The ground is parched, cracked, and pale. Yet when the eye follows the subtle arrangement of stones across the flat expanse, patterns begin to emerge. Lines, circles, and carefully positioned megaliths that hint at intentions far beyond simple survival. Nabta Playa, archaeologists tell us, was once a more hospitable environment. Around 7,000 to 6,000 BC, the basin supported seasonal lakes, attracting nomadic pastoralists who brought with them not only domesticated cattle, but also a sophisticated understanding of the land. Amid this landscape, they erected stone structures, alignments and circles that, from above, seemed to map the heavens themselves. Some stones are grouped in concentric circles. Others extend in straight lines for tens of meters, pointing toward the rising and setting of certain stars, or the solstices. The precision is remarkable, particularly given the era in which they were constructed. The mainstream explanation suggests that these stone alignments functioned as a kind of prehistoric observatory, a tool to track celestial events, the cycles of the sun and stars, and perhaps the timing of seasonal rains critical for both cattle and human survival. The largest circles, sometimes referred to as calendar circles, could mark the summer solstice with astonishing accuracy. And yet, as we examine the site, questions arise. The placement of stones is deliberate, yet the reasoning behind specific configurations often remains opaque. Why were some stones clustered tightly while others were isolated? Were these purely practical markers, or did they carry symbolic or ritual significance beyond our comprehension? One cannot ignore the scale of human effort involved. Moving massive stones in a desert environment without modern tools is a feat in itself, and yet the labor invested in these constructions implies more than utility. It suggests organization, planning, and perhaps even a social or spiritual hierarchy capable of coordinating large groups over generations. Could it be that these pastoral communities possessed a knowledge of mathematics or astronomy far earlier than we previously imagined? Were these the first steps toward the kind of structured thought that would later emerge in civilizations like Sumer and Egypt? Some researchers have proposed even more provocative ideas. The alignments appear to reflect patterns that may correspond to star constellations, an observation that borders on speculative, given the shifting positions of stars over millennia. Others suggest the site may have served as a convergence point for communities, a place of ritual, trade, or even pilgrimage. Yet no inscriptions, no written records, and few artifacts accompany the stones to clarify their purpose. The silence of the desert is profound, almost intentional, as if guarding knowledge we are only beginning to glimpse. Walking among the stone rows today, the desert wind carries a sense of timelessness. The stones themselves are weathered, some toppled, others half buried in sand, yet their arrangement continues to evoke awe. There is a rhythm here, a connection between human action and cosmic order that invites reflection. What did these people see when they looked at the night sky? How did the patterns of stars shape their understanding of life, survival, and the cycles of the world around them? And perhaps most intriguingly, why have these alignments endured, unmarked by the passing of civilizations, as if the desert itself has preserved a message meant for those willing to search carefully enough. Nabta Playa also challenges our assumptions about prehistoric societies. We often think of hunter-gatherers and early pastoralists as rudimentary, yet the sophistication evident in these alignments suggests careful observation, deliberate measurement, and perhaps an emerging grasp of geometric principles. Could these structures be early experiments in astronomy, mathematics, or even early engineering? Or were they expressions of belief, a way to connect earthly existence with the vast patterns of the cosmos? And still, much of the story remains hidden beneath the shifting sands. There may be stones yet uncovered, alignments yet unrecognized, or subtleties in orientation that our modern eyes fail to perceive. How many generations of human thought went into shaping this landscape? And what knowledge, encoded in the silent language of stone, might have been lost to time, waiting for patient observers to decipher? As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the basin, one cannot help but sense the continuity between the human impulse to understand, to measure, and to align with forces larger than ourselves. Just as with Budj Bim, the mysteries of Nabta Playa remind us that prehistoric ingenuity was not random. It was intentional, sophisticated, and in many ways still beyond our full comprehension. Perhaps the desert, like the volcanic plains of Australia, is a mirror of human curiosity, a testament to minds that sought order in chaos, permanence in impermanence, and meaning in the vast, silent night sky. From the sun-baked plateau of Dhar Tichitt, our journey now turns north, following the course of the Danube River, to a rocky bend in modern-day Serbia where one of Europe's most enigmatic prehistoric settlements emerges from the mist of time, Lepenski Vir. Here, on the steep terraces overlooking the river, the remains of houses, sculptures, and carefully arranged hearths testify to a community that flourished between approximately 7,000 and 6,000 BC. At first glance, the site seems ordinary. Stone foundations scattered across the uneven terraces, remnants of a long-vanished village. Yet, upon closer examination, the precision, consistency, and unusual design of the structures become impossible to ignore. The houses of Lepenski Vir are immediately striking for their shape. Unlike the circular or rectangular dwellings common in contemporary Neolithic Europe, these homes are trapezoidal, their narrower ends consistently facing the river. Foundations are carefully constructed from local stone and mortar, set within terraces leveled to create flat, stable building surfaces. Each house appears unique at first, but patterns emerge. Dimensions, orientation, and spacing suggest intentional planning, a visual language repeated across generations. Even the placement of hearths, often positioned at the wider end of the trapezoid, seems deliberate, echoing the rhythm of both daily life and ceremonial practice. Archaeologists have long marveled at this consistency. Why trapezoids rather than rectangles or circles? Was the shape dictated by practical considerations, such as wind direction, solar exposure, or flood prevention? Or did it carry symbolic significance, perhaps reflecting beliefs about the river, the cycles of the sun, or the passage of the seasons? Some researchers propose that the trapezoid may have been a form of proto-geometry, a conscious method of imposing order on irregular terrain, aligning human dwellings with the landscape in both functional and symbolic ways. The connection between the houses and the Danube itself is compelling. The river provided sustenance, trade routes, and a rhythm to the lives of the inhabitants. Yet the architectural choices suggest more than simple utility. The consistent orientation of dwellings toward the river hints at a community intimately attuned to its environment, one in which observation, measurement, and shared knowledge shaped both construction and culture. Could this alignment reflect early astronomical understanding, echoing patterns observed at Nabta Playa, or other prehistoric observatories? Or does it signify something more social, an expression of collective identity, cohesion, and shared ritual? Adding to the mystery is the presence of sculptures carved from stone and sometimes buried within or near house foundations. Many depict abstract fish-like or humanoid forms, blending human and aquatic characteristics. These artworks raise questions about the intersection of daily life and spirituality. Were they protective symbols, representations of deities, or markers of lineage or status? The consistency in the placement and style of the sculptures suggests rules or traditions, yet their meaning remains elusive. How did these symbolic elements interact with the architectural decisions? The trapezoidal shape, the hearth placement, the orientation of walls, to create a holistic design philosophy that guided the community? Even more intriguing is the precision with which terraces and foundations were constructed. The uneven slope of the Danube terraces might seem inhospitable to large-scale settlement, yet the people of Lepenski Vir adapted, leveling and reinforcing surfaces with stone and mortar. The trapezoidal plan may have been a practical solution to irregular terrain, yet the repetition and standardization across multiple houses suggest an intellectual framework, an early form of mathematical or spatial reasoning. Could this have been the product of trial and error, refined over generations, or the result of deliberate teaching passed down from elders to younger builders? Walking the site today, one senses the interplay of order and observation. The river flows steadily below, the terraces remain sculpted into the landscape, and the stone foundations of homes whisper of lives lived in careful balance with nature. There is an elegance here, a blending of practicality and abstract thought in which geometry, ritual, and survival converge. Yet, for all we can discern, so much remains hidden beneath centuries of sediment and erosion. Foundations may conceal earlier structures. Hearths might mark spaces whose function is lost to memory. Subtle patterns in orientation or spacing may encode knowledge we are only beginning to interpret. And then there is the broader question of influence. Lepenski Vir existed in a world without written records, yet its architectural sophistication suggests a culture capable of abstract reasoning and social coordination, comparable to later Neolithic communities elsewhere. How much knowledge of mathematics, spatial reasoning, or even early engineering principles was embedded in the design of these trapezoidal homes? Were these ideas isolated to the Danube Valley, or part of a wider network of prehistoric intellectual exchange stretching across Europe and the Near East? As we gaze over the terraces from the vantage of the riverbank, it becomes clear that Lepenski Vir is more than a collection of stone foundations. It is a statement of human intention, a reflection of a community striving to impose order, meaning, and permanence upon an unpredictable world. Like the settlements of Dhar Tichitt, Nabta Playa, and Budj, it challenges assumptions about prehistoric societies, revealing ingenuity, observation, and planning that seem remarkably advanced for the time. And yet, the ultimate purpose of the trapezoidal design, the subtle mathematics, the orientation toward the river, the interplay of hearth, sculpture, and dwelling, remains a mystery. What principles guided the builder's hands, and what knowledge has been lost to time, hidden within the shapes and alignments of stone? In the fading light, the terraces of Lepenski Vir offer no answers, only questions about human creativity, the evolution of spatial reasoning, and the enduring human impulse to shape the world with precision and meaning. Like all the sites we have explored so far, it leaves us standing between what we can see and what we can only imagine. An invitation to consider the sophistication of prehistoric thought, the hidden mathematics of human design, and the mysteries that remain etched into the very landscape itself. From the terraces of the Danube at Lepenski Vir, our exploration now moves southeast, across the Fertile Crescent, to the semi-arid landscapes of modern-day eastern Jordan. Here lies Kharaneh IV, a site that at first glance appears as a quiet expanse of rocky desert dotted with subtle mounds and depressions. Yet beneath this unassuming surface lies one of the largest known prehistoric settlements in the Near East, occupied between approximately 19,000 and 17,000 BC. Unlike the carefully aligned trapezoidal houses of Lepenski Vir, Kharaneh IV challenges our sense of scale and ambition, presenting evidence of a community whose planning, construction, and social organization are extraordinary for a time long before permanent villages became widespread. Archaeologists first noted the size of the site, which extends across tens of thousands of square meters. Within this expanse, they uncovered concentrations of stone tools, hearths, and remains of dwellings, clusters that suggest both temporary shelters and more stable living spaces. But Kharaneh IV is remarkable not merely for its scale. It is the subtle indications of deliberate layout, repeated construction patterns, and spatial planning that hint at an early form of communal organization. Groups of structures appear oriented in relation to one another, forming loose but recognizable patterns that suggest the inhabitants understood the advantages of organized space, even in a world dominated by mobility and the unpredictability of climate. The presence of repeated building features, central hearths, circular or semicircular structures, and carefully positioned stones implies both ritual and practicality. Some researchers argue that the site functioned as a seasonal gathering place for hunter-gatherer groups, a center where social, economic, and spiritual life converged. Yet the sheer scale of Kharaneh IV, along with the density of remains, challenges traditional interpretations. How did these people coordinate labor over such a large area? Was there a hierarchy or a system of rules guiding construction, maintenance, and social interaction? And could there have been an underlying logic or geometric awareness informing the arrangement of structures, an early manifestation of mathematical thinking in spatial planning? Environmental context adds another layer of intrigue. Kharaneh IV is located in a region that alternated between wetter periods and near-desert conditions. Seasonal floods and shifting water sources would have influenced settlement patterns, yet the inhabitants appear to have chosen this location repeatedly over centuries. Was the site selected for practical reasons, such as access to water and game, or did it hold a deeper significance, perhaps cosmological, ritualistic, or symbolic, that transcended immediate survival? Some stone placements seem to suggest alignment with celestial events or with prominent features on the horizon, though interpretations remain speculative. The artifacts themselves hint at sophistication. Lithic tools, including finely worked blades, suggest advanced craftsmanship. Animal bones and charred remains indicate a diverse diet and careful resource management. There are signs of repeated repair, rebuilding, and adaptation, an awareness of permanence and continuity unusual for the Paleolithic period. Could Kharaneh IV represent a precursor to the more famous sedentary villages of the Neolithic, a bridge between mobility and settlement, between observation of the environment and deliberate manipulation of space? Walking across the site today, one is struck by the sense of deliberate human presence. The mounds and depressions mark the echoes of countless activities: communal gatherings around fires, preparation of food, shaping of tools, and perhaps ceremonies whose meaning is now obscured. Unlike smaller temporary camps, Kharaneh IV conveys ambition, an organized, multi-generational vision of community life. But what principles guided this vision? Were the spatial arrangements purely practical, ensuring efficient use of space and resources, or did they encode a deeper understanding of proportion, measurement, or early mathematics? Some of the most tantalizing clues come from the hearths and stone placements. Central hearths in clusters of dwellings suggest not only communal gathering, but perhaps shared rituals or social norms. Stones that appear to delineate boundaries hint at territorial awareness or property demarcation. Could these features represent one of the earliest examples of structured social planning, where mathematics, observation, and human cooperation intersected in a deliberate, reproducible way? Or were they practical solutions honed over generations, later inspiring more formalized settlement planning as humans moved into the Neolithic era? The broader implications of Kharaneh IV remain profound. Here, in a period far removed from written history, humans were experimenting with permanence, spatial organization, and communal life on a scale that defies expectations. The site challenges long-held assumptions that Paleolithic societies were entirely nomadic and fragmented, showing instead that humans possessed the cognitive capacity for planning, observation, and construction that foreshadowed the rise of villages, towns, and eventually cities. And yet, despite extensive study, the site retains its mysteries. How much knowledge about environmental cycles, spatial reasoning, and human cooperation is encoded in the layout of Kharaneh IV? Could there be patterns, subtle alignments, or structural rules that we have yet to recognize? Mathematical principles embedded in the ground, visible only to those who study carefully, analytically, and patiently? As with Lepenski and the other sites we have explored, Kharaneh IV offers tantalizing evidence of prehistoric ingenuity, but it also reminds us of how much remains beyond our grasp, hidden in stone, sand, and memory. Standing across the expanse of Kharaneh IV, it is impossible not to sense the ambition, observation, and intelligence of its builders. They created a space that supported life, ritual, and social cohesion long before cities existed, long before written records documented human thought. The site invites reflection on the nature of prehistoric knowledge, how early humans understood space, order, and perhaps even mathematical relationships, and how such knowledge shaped the trajectory of civilization itself. And yet, as we trace the outlines of structures and stone clusters, we are left with the same profound question that unites all these ancient sites. What other secrets remain buried, waiting to reveal how far human ingenuity and understanding truly extended, thousands of years before Sumer, before cities, before history as we know it began? From the expansive plains of eastern Jordan at Kharaneh IV, where early humans experimented with large-scale settlement and spatial organization, our journey now travels thousands of kilometers eastward, deep into the highlands of Papua New Guinea. Here, amid mist-covered mountains and tangled wetlands, lies Kuk Swamp, a site that at first appears as a simple, swampy expanse of reeds and water channels. Yet beneath its surface, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a prehistoric agricultural system so sophisticated it challenges conventional timelines of human ingenuity. This is a landscape where early farmers, thousands of years before Sumer, shaped their environment with intention, transforming wetlands into a structured, productive space through design, observation, and perhaps an intuitive grasp of hydrology and mathematics. Kuk Swamp was first studied in detail in the 1970s, and what archaeologists found was extraordinary. Beneath the murky waters and layers of peat, they discovered channels, ditches, and mounds arranged in deliberate patterns. These were not random. They were engineered to drain water, retain nutrients, and optimize cultivation. The structures, some dating as far back as 7000 BC, indicate that early New Guineans were not merely foraging, they were actively managing landscapes, planning for seasonal cycles, and shaping ecosystems to ensure reliable food production. The scale and complexity of Kuk Swamp are striking. Networks of channels crisscross the wetland, guiding the flow of water with careful attention to elevation, slope, and soil saturation. Mounds of earth were created to raise planting surfaces above flood levels, while other channels served as natural irrigation, keeping crops healthy during dry periods. The precision of these interventions suggests observation over generations, trial and error refined into repeatable techniques, and a deep understanding of environmental cycles. Could this be considered one of the earliest examples of applied agricultural mathematics? Human intelligence used to manipulate the landscape in a predictable, controlled way? Yet Cook Swamp is more than an engineering marvel. It is also a window into social organization. The construction and maintenance of ditches and mounds would have required coordination among groups, knowledge sharing, and perhaps social norms governing labor and land use. Who decided where channels should run? How were planting schedules determined and enforced? The evidence points to a society capable of complex collaboration, long before written records documented governance or agriculture in other parts of the world. Some features of Cook Swamp remain enigmatic. Certain channels appear to follow patterns that are not purely functional, suggesting symbolic or ritual purposes alongside practical ones. Could these alignments relate to seasonal changes, astronomical observation, or spiritual beliefs tied to the land and water? While we cannot be certain, the possibility that early New Guineans integrated cosmological understanding with agricultural planning opens fascinating questions about prehistoric cognition and the origins of applied mathematics. Were these structures designed solely for survival, or did they also encode knowledge of cycles, proportion, and environmental balance? The archaeological record also hints at adaptability and experimentation. Over thousands of years, the wetlands were repeatedly reconfigured. Channels widened, mounds reinforced, planting surfaces raised or shifted. This reflects a community attentive to feedback from the environment, capable of observation, measurement, and iterative design. How did they measure slope, water flow, or soil fertility without modern tools? Could the patterns of channels and mounds themselves represent a form of prehistoric engineering knowledge, passed down orally, refined over generations, and codified in the landscape itself? Visiting Cook Swamp today, the land seems serene, almost timeless, with mist curling above shallow waters and the soft rustle of reeds in the wind. Yet beneath this calm surface lies a record of human intelligence, of people who shaped the land with foresight and precision. The layout of channels, the spacing of mounds, the alignment of ditches, all suggest a subtle mathematical sensibility, a capacity to perceive patterns, plan accordingly, and manipulate the natural world in ways that prefigure later civilizations. In many ways, Cook Swamp resonates with the sites we have explored before. Kharaneh IV with its coordinated structures, Dhar Tichitt with its strategic settlements, and Lepenski with its trapezoidal houses. Across continents and millennia, early humans were experimenting with spatial reasoning, environmental mastery, and systematic design. Yet, Cook Swamp introduces an element unique to agriculture: the deliberate shaping of living ecosystems to sustain human life. Here, human ingenuity interacts directly with nature, blending observation, labor, and planning in a tangible, measurable way. And yet, mysteries remain. How precisely were these structures planned and maintained? Are there patterns hidden in the layout of channels and mounds that could reveal lost techniques or even early forms of mathematical calculation? Could the alignment of certain ditches relate to seasonal sun positions, rainfall cycles, or ecological knowledge encoded in a form we are only beginning to understand? How much of this knowledge was lost as societies changed, or absorbed into oral traditions that left no trace but the patterns in the swamp itself? Cook Swamp stands as a quiet testament to the ingenuity of prehistoric communities, to their ability to observe, measure, and manipulate their environment with foresight and precision. It reminds us that human intelligence, creativity, and problem-solving existed long before urban centers, monumental temples, or written records. And as we trace the subtle channels and mounds across the wetland, we are confronted with the same profound questions that echo through every prehistoric site we have explored. What knowledge did these early people possess, and what mysteries remain buried, waiting for patient observers to uncover the sophistication of human thought that existed thousands of years before Sumer? From the wetlands of Cook Swamp, where early humans engineered water, soil, and vegetation with remarkable foresight, our journey now moves westward across the Levant to the rolling hills and fertile valleys near modern-day Palestine. Here, nestled among limestone terraces and overlooking the approaches to the Judean hills, lies Motza, a Neolithic megasite that, at first glance, might appear modest compared to the monumental stone temples of Anatolia or the vast networks of New Guinea. Yet beneath its surface lies a story of remarkable human ingenuity, planning, and precision, one that challenges assumptions about the scale, organization, and sophistication of early farming communities in the Levant around 8,000 to 6,000 BC. Walking across the site today, one is struck by the interplay between the natural landscape and human design. Shallow depressions hint at former dwellings, carefully placed on terraces that capture sunlight and drainage, while fragments of plastered floors, storage pits, and hearths reveal a community deeply attuned to both survival and social cohesion. Unlike temporary camps, Motza's dwellings suggest permanence, an intentional shaping of space that anticipates the rhythms of daily life, seasonal cycles, and communal gatherings. The consistency in construction techniques, the alignment of houses, and the organization of communal areas all point to deliberate planning, a reflection of knowledge accumulated over generations and expressed in stone, clay, and earth. Motza is not just remarkable for its architecture. Excavations have revealed evidence of large-scale storage facilities, sophisticated tool production, and early agricultural experimentation. Cereals such as barley and wheat were cultivated and stored in granaries, while flint tools show careful craftsmanship, repeated forms, and standardization that hint at both technical skill and aesthetic sensibility. The integration of these elements, living spaces, storage, and work areas, suggests a comprehensive vision of settlement, one that blends functionality with foresight, organization, and perhaps even an implicit understanding of proportion, measurement, and spatial mathematics. What draws particular intrigue is the arrangement of the site itself. Dwellings and communal spaces appear aligned along axes that take advantage of terrain, sunlight, and drainage. Certain compounds suggest deliberate orientation to nearby landmarks, possibly serving as reference points for seasonal observation or ritual practice. Were these alignments purely practical, optimized for climate and agriculture, or did they reflect a deeper understanding of the cosmos, a proto-astronomical awareness embedded within the very layout of the settlement? Some researchers propose that these spatial relationships may encode knowledge of seasonal cycles, guiding planting, harvesting, or ceremonial timing. Others suggest that the megasite's design may reflect social hierarchy or communal planning, a method of organizing human activity across a shared landscape in ways that were as much symbolic as practical. Artifacts from Motza hint at a vibrant, connected culture. Pottery fragments show patterns and motifs that echo broader Levantine traditions, suggesting trade, cultural exchange, or shared symbolic languages. Stone tools, meticulously knapped, reveal an attention to standardization and efficiency that transcends survival, pointing to skill, learning, and perhaps even early experimentation with geometric principles. Could it be that the builders of Motza were encoding patterns of proportion or symmetry within their dwellings, granaries, and workspaces? Could their understanding of space, structure, and measurement be a precursor to the architectural sophistication seen later in sites such as Göbekli Tepe or Jericho? The environmental context of Motza adds another layer of mystery. The fertile limestone terraces of the Judean hills provided water, arable soil, and natural protection, yet the site's enduring success would have required careful planning, adaptation, and foresight. Terraces, retaining walls, and drainage channels reflect a profound awareness of how to manipulate the landscape to sustain crops, dwellings, and communal life over decades or centuries. The interplay of human intervention and natural resources hints at an intuitive grasp of environmental engineering, a skill set that, when viewed across time, mirrors the ingenuity seen in sites such as Cook Swamp or Dhar Tichitt. Perhaps most intriguing are the subtler signs of intentional order, the elements that suggest cognitive sophistication beyond survival. The placement of hearths, storage pits, and communal spaces hints at an understanding of social dynamics, movement, and interaction. Could the builders have used early forms of mapping, counting, or measurement to plan construction? Did the repetitive placement of structural elements reflect an inherited knowledge of proportion, akin to mathematical rules or architectural guidelines? Even the most mundane aspects of settlement, stone foundations, pathways, terraces, may encode principles of early human spatial reasoning, waiting for careful analysis to reveal their logic. Motza also raises questions about connectivity and influence. Situated near ancient trade and migration routes, it likely functioned as a hub of social, economic, and technological exchange. Were ideas about planning, construction, and agriculture developed here independently, or were they shared across the Levant, perhaps traveling alongside domesticated crops, tools, and cultural practices? The site's scale, organization, and durability hint at an awareness of communal continuity, a recognition that the settlement must endure and function across generations, much like the enduring stone arrangements of Nabta Playa, Lepenski or Kharaneh IV. Standing on the terraces of Motza, it is possible to sense the rhythm of human activity that once filled the site. Families tending crops, artisans shaping stone, children moving along carefully leveled pathways, communal meals around hearths. The precision and repetition of these actions suggest order, intention, and foresight. The megasite embodies a quiet but profound ingenuity, a knowledge of construction, measurement, and coordination that predates the earliest written records by millennia. Yet, for all the sophistication visible today, much remains unknown. How exactly were these terraces, dwellings, and communal structures planned? What principles guided their placement, orientation, and proportion? Could Motza reveal early forms of mathematical reasoning, embedded in the very layout of the settlement and the management of space? And what might still lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to expand our understanding of Neolithic human ingenuity? Motza reminds us that, long before Sumer, humans were experimenting with permanence, precision, and design. They were not merely surviving, they were shaping their environment, building for the future, and encoding knowledge in stone, earth, and space. The megasite challenges assumptions about the capabilities of Neolithic communities, revealing intelligence, observation, and foresight on a scale that continues to astonish. And as we trace the terraces, walls, and foundations today, we are left with the same profound question that echoes across every prehistoric site we have explored. What other secrets remain buried, waiting to reveal the depth of human understanding that existed thousands of years before history as we know it began? From the fertile terraces of Motza, where Neolithic communities shaped their environment with precision and foresight, our journey now carries us across deserts and seas to the waters of the Arabian Gulf. Here, on the quiet, wind-swept expanse of Marawah Island, lie stone structures that at first appear deceptively simple. Low walls, scattered cairns, and carefully arranged rock circles. Yet beneath their modest appearance lies evidence of a prehistoric society that understood geometry, alignment, and construction in ways that continue to puzzle archaeologists. Marawah, with its isolated location and exposed landscape, offers a glimpse into a chapter of human history where ingenuity, observation, and environmental mastery converged in stone. The island itself is stark, a windswept plateau rising from shallow waters and tidal flats, its surface littered with limestone outcrops and scattered boulders. Yet even here, thousands of years ago, humans chose to build. Excavations reveal a complex of circular, oval, and linear stone arrangements, some forming low enclosures, others delineating pathways or ceremonial spaces. Unlike simple hunting camps or temporary shelters, these structures demonstrate consistent patterns in size, shape, and orientation, suggesting deliberate design. Could these patterns represent an early understanding of spatial relationships, symmetry, or measurement? A prehistoric geometry applied directly to the landscape? Marawah's structures are particularly intriguing because of their scale and precision. Cairns and low walls are often aligned along subtle axes, sometimes oriented toward distant landmarks or celestial points. Some formations suggest functional purposes, corrals, living spaces, or markers, but others resist easy explanation. Why do certain circles cluster together, while others stand in isolation? Why do some linear arrangements intersect with curves at precise angles? The regularity of these structures implies observation and planning, yet the exact logic behind their arrangement remains elusive. Did the builders possess an awareness of the stars, the tides, or seasonal shifts that guided their construction? Or were these alignments symbolic, ritualistic, or social, marking sacred ground, communal gathering spaces, or territorial boundaries? Artifacts recovered from Marawah provide tantalizing glimpses of daily life, yet they also deepen the mystery. Stone tools, often finely worked and standardized, indicate technical skill and long-term habitation, while shell beads and other decorative objects suggest social complexity, aesthetic sensibility, and perhaps ritual practice. These finds hint at a culture capable of careful planning, not only in material construction but also in social organization. How did a small, isolated island community coordinate labor, share knowledge, and maintain the precision of these structures over generations? Could they have employed counting systems, measurement techniques, or practical geometry, even without formalized writing or recorded mathematics? Environmental context adds another layer of fascination. Marawah lies at the interface of sea, tidal flats, and desert, a place of shifting waters and unpredictable resources. Constructing stable stone structures here would have required not only labor but foresight, awareness of tides, seasonal water levels, and prevailing winds. The placement of certain cairns near low-lying areas may indicate strategies to mitigate flooding or erosion, while elevated enclosures could serve as shelters or markers visible from afar. In this way, Marawah Island stands as both a laboratory and a canvas where human ingenuity adapted to a challenging environment with both precision and subtlety. Yet many questions remain. Some structures seem to carry symbolic or ritual significance, hinting at beliefs or practices we can only speculate upon. Could the arrangement of stones encode knowledge about the lunar or solar cycles, guiding ceremonial or agricultural activity? Do the patterns reflect a social or territorial logic, mapping ownership, group identity, or spiritual geography across the island? Archaeologists have noted echoes of other prehistoric sites in the region, yet Marawah's isolation gives it a distinct character, a blend of functionality, observation, and enigmatic design that challenges our understanding of early human societies. The scale of construction suggests careful coordination. Low walls and cairns, while individually simple, appear to form networks of connected spaces. Some alignments, repeated across multiple clusters, hint at rules of proportion or measurement. Could these rules reflect an intuitive grasp of geometry, a system developed through observation and iteration rather than formalized teaching? The consistency of shapes, angles, and spacing is remarkable, especially given the island's isolation and the time period, roughly 6,000 to 5,000 BC. Here, we see humans thinking beyond immediate survival, engaging in planning, precision, and perhaps even experimentation with abstract concepts that would later underpin more elaborate architecture elsewhere. Walking across Marawah today, the land seems silent, yet it echoes with human intention. Each stone circle, cairn, and linear alignment marks a decision, an observation, a deliberate act repeated over generations. The structures invite reflection on the cognitive abilities of prehistoric communities, the capacity to measure, align, and coordinate human activity over space and time. Unlike the monumental megaliths of Göbekli Tepe or the urban layouts of Motza, Marawah is subtle, its genius expressed in small, repeated gestures that together form a coherent landscape. And yet, for all the insight the site offers, it remains largely enigmatic. How precisely were these arrangements conceived? Did the builders possess a shared system of knowledge, passed down orally or through observation, that guided every placement, angle, and enclosure? What purposes, ritual, social, territorial, or practical, did the structures serve, and how did they evolve over time? Could there be mathematical or astronomical principles encoded in their layout that have yet to be fully understood? Marawah Island, like every site we have explored on this journey, from Budj and Nabta Playa to Dhar Tichitt, Lepenski Veer, Kharaneh IV, Cook Swamp, and Motza, reminds us that prehistoric humans were far more capable, observant, and innovative than often assumed. They shaped their landscapes with foresight and precision, experimenting with form, function, and meaning in ways that resonate across millennia. The stone structures of Marawah, modest yet meticulously placed, challenge us to reconsider the origins of planning, measurement, and social organization in human history. As we gaze across the wind-swept terraces and tidal flats, it is impossible not to feel a connection across time. The stones mark choices, observation, and perhaps even an early understanding of geometry and proportion. Yet, as with so many prehistoric sites, Marawah leaves its story incomplete, inviting us to wonder, how much knowledge remains hidden beneath layers of sand and history? What other principles of alignment, measurement, or social organization have yet to be discovered, quietly encoded in the subtle precision of stones laid thousands of years before Sumer, before cities, before written records? In the end, Marawah Island stands as a silent, enigmatic testament to human ingenuity, precision, and imagination, a landscape shaped not only for survival, but for understanding, order, and perhaps the expression of something beyond the purely practical. Its mysteries endure, waiting for the patient observer to uncover the intelligence and foresight of the humans who lived, built, and left their mark here so long ago. From the isolated shores of Marawah Island, where prehistoric communities carved meaning and precision into stone amidst tidal flats and wind-swept landscapes, our journey now sweeps southward across the sands of the western desert of Egypt to a place both stark and haunting, Gebel Ramlah. Here, amidst rolling dunes and scattered rocky outcrops, lie clusters of stone circles, low mounds, and aligned megaliths, their silent presence whispering of human hands that shaped them thousands of years before Sumer. At first glance, the site might seem deceptively simple, a scattering of stones on an endless plain, but closer inspection reveals a deliberate, carefully orchestrated design, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of geometry, space, and social organization. Gebel Ramlah stretches across a vast desert plateau, a landscape of ochre sands, scattered pebbles, and sparse vegetation. Amidst this harsh environment, the stone circles appear almost surreal, geometric forms etched into the earth with precision that surprises and challenges modern assumptions about prehistoric communities. Excavations have revealed that these circles, many measuring several meters in diameter, were constructed over generations, often incorporating burial pits, grave goods, and carefully shaped stone slabs. The density of the arrangement suggests not random placement, but an intentional, repeated pattern, a prehistoric blueprint etched into the land itself. Archaeologists date the site to roughly 5,500 to 4,500 BC, placing it in the Neolithic era, a time when humans were transitioning from nomadic hunting and gathering to more settled ways of life. Yet Gebel Ramlah defies easy classification. Unlike many Neolithic sites, the stone circles are not merely domestic or agricultural. They appear to serve multiple functions simultaneously: social, ceremonial, and perhaps astronomical. Certain circles contain burials oriented along consistent axes, suggesting ritual significance and an awareness of spatial alignment. Others form alignments that intersect at precise angles, inviting speculation about observation of the sun, moon, or stars. Were these prehistoric architects attempting to encode cosmological knowledge into stone? Or were these alignments symbolic, marking sacred ground, ancestral memory, or social hierarchy? The construction of the circles demonstrates remarkable skill and planning. Stones, often locally sourced, were selected, shaped, and arranged with consistency, producing forms that are not only durable but also visually coherent. In some cases, the circles incorporate internal features, subdivisions, central slabs, or peripheral markers that suggest counting, proportion, or measurement. Could these internal divisions represent an early understanding of geometry, a system for mapping or organizing space that predates formal mathematics? Or were they simply practical, reflecting burials, seating arrangements, or enclosures for ritual activity? The ambiguity itself is part of the site's power, leaving observers suspended between the realms of evidence and imagination. Artifacts recovered from Gebel Ramlah provide glimpses into the lives of its builders. Flint tools, shell ornaments, and pottery fragments indicate a community with craft specialization, trade networks, and social cohesion. Some grave goods suggest hierarchical or ritual distinctions, hinting at organized social structures and belief systems. Yet the precision of the stone circles themselves suggests a level of planning and measurement that transcends daily survival. Were these early humans intuitively applying mathematical principles, or did they possess an empirical knowledge of angles, symmetry, and proportion honed over generations of observation and practice? The stones, in their arrangement, suggest both discipline and intentionality, evidence of cognitive abilities that modern societies would later formalize in written geometry and architecture. The desert environment of Gebel Ramlah adds further intrigue. Life here required careful management of scarce water and food resources, yet the builders invested significant energy in constructing non-utilitarian structures with subtle but clear patterns. Was the effort purely ceremonial, a testament to ancestral veneration or social cohesion? Or might these arrangements have had practical implications, guiding movement, resource use, or seasonal observation across the desert landscape? Some researchers suggest that certain alignments correspond to solstices or lunar events, hinting at an awareness of celestial cycles that resonates with other prehistoric sites around the world, from Nabta Playa in southern Egypt to Motza in the Levant. Walking across the site today, one is struck by a sense of rhythm and intentionality. Circles cluster in groups, intersect with straight alignments, and subtly vary in size, forming a landscape that is at once ordered and organic. The layout encourages reflection. Pathways between circles guide movement, intersections may mark focal points, and central slabs suggest gathering or ritual activity. Every stone seems to hold a purpose, yet much of that purpose remains opaque to modern observers. The site challenges assumptions about prehistoric cognition, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of space, proportion, and communal design that continues to surprise archaeologists and historians alike. Gebel Ramlah also raises questions about knowledge transmission. How did these communities coordinate labor, plan construction, and maintain consistency over generations? Were these skills encoded in social memory, ritual instruction, or practical apprenticeship? Could the repetitive geometry of the stone circles represent an early form of codified knowledge, a precursor to more formal systems of measurement and mathematics developed thousands of years later in Mesopotamia? The site exists as both evidence and puzzle, a silent testament to human ingenuity that eludes complete comprehension. And yet, despite decades of study, much remains mysterious. Why were these stone circles built in this particular configuration? What motivated the placement of individual stones or the alignment of certain circles? Could there be undiscovered features buried beneath sand and sediment, or patterns that only reveal themselves through careful mapping, observation, or mathematical analysis? Each unanswered question deepens the sense of wonder, reminding us that the story of Gebel Ramlah is incomplete, held in the quiet precision of stones set in the desert thousands of years ago. As we reflect on Gebel Ramlah, it is impossible not to notice echoes of the sites we have already explored. The carefully arranged channels and mounds of Kuk Swamp, the terraces and dwellings of Motza, the stone structures of Marawah, each testifying to the human drive to observe, measure, and manipulate space with intention. Across continents and millennia, we see recurring evidence of spatial reasoning, planning, and proto-mathematical thinking. Gebel Ramlah, with its enigmatic stone circles and alignments, reinforces this continuity, reminding us that human intelligence, creativity, and ingenuity existed long before the rise of cities, writing, or recorded science. Standing amidst the desert sands, gazing at the circles silhouetted against the horizon, one cannot help but feel the presence of the ancient builders. Their choices, encoded in stone, offer both clarity and mystery, a deliberate order that speaks to knowledge, observation, and perhaps ritual purpose, yet leaving unanswered questions that continue to intrigue and challenge modern understanding. How much of their reasoning remains lost to time? What insights into prehistoric cognition, social organization, and spatial mathematics lie hidden beneath the sands? Gebel Ramlah is a silent, enduring reminder that the human capacity to shape, measure, and understand the world stretches far deeper into prehistory than we often realize, and that mysteries still await patient and careful investigation. As the previous landscapes of deep antiquity recede into silence, the journey continues westward, into a place where the desert itself seems to pause and remember. Beyond the familiar river corridors and early settlements already explored, the camera drifts into Egypt's western desert, far from the Nile's dependable rhythms. Here, in a remote basin once shaped by seasonal rains, lies Gebel Ramlah, a quiet expanse of sand, stone, and time. At first glance, the terrain appears empty. Pale dunes stretch toward a washed-out horizon, broken only by low ridges of sandstone and gravel plains scorched by the sun. The air shimmers with heat, and the wind moves slowly, carrying grains of sand that have traveled for thousands of years. Yet scattered across this desolate ground are patterns that do not belong to chance. Rings of stone emerge from the desert floor, carefully placed, deliberately shaped, and stubbornly resistant to oblivion. These are the stone circles of Gebel Ramlah. They sit low against the earth, modest in scale compared to later monumental structures, but their presence is unmistakable. Each circle is composed of upright slabs and smaller stones arranged with a precision that feels intentional rather than accidental. Some are complete rings, others are partial, broken by time or shifting sands. Their geometry is subtle, almost restrained, as if the builders were less concerned with spectacle and more focused on alignment, proportion, and meaning. Archaeological evidence places these structures around 5,000 to 4,000 BC, during a period when the Sahara was not yet the lifeless desert we know today. This was the African humid period, a time when rainfall transformed the region into a mosaic of shallow lakes, grasslands, and migratory corridors for both animals and humans. Gebel Ramlah would have been a seasonal gathering place sustained by fresh water and rich ecological diversity. Excavations in the area have revealed cemeteries, hearths, pottery fragments, and human remains, suggesting that small pastoral communities lived and returned here over generations. These were cattle herders, moving with the seasons, adapting to a landscape that was already beginning to change. Their lives were bound to cycles of rain, migration, birth, and death, and within this rhythm, the stone circles appear to have played a role that went beyond the practical. Mainstream archaeology offers cautious interpretations. The circles may have functioned as ceremonial markers, ritual spaces, or memorials tied to burial practices nearby. Some are associated with human interments, carefully arranged and accompanied by grave goods, including beads, shells, and stone tools. The attention given to the dead suggests a belief system that extended beyond survival, a concern with ancestry, memory, and perhaps an unseen order governing life. Yet the precision of the stone placements raises additional questions. Certain circles exhibit clear geometric planning. Stones are spaced evenly, diameters are consistent, and orientations appear deliberate. In at least one instance, researchers have noted alignments that correspond with solar events, such as the summer solstice, an observation that inevitably invites comparison to better-known prehistoric sites far beyond the Sahara. Could these circles have served as rudimentary astronomical markers? If so, the implication is striking. It would suggest that the people of Gebel Ramlah were not only attentive to the land beneath their feet, but also to the sky above them. Tracking the sun's movement would have been more than symbolic. It could have helped regulate seasonal migrations, predict rainfall patterns, or time communal gatherings. In a landscape where survival depended on anticipating change, celestial observation may have been a form of knowledge as vital as any tool. Still, the evidence remains fragmentary. Unlike later megalithic sites, Gebel Ramlah offers no towering stones or engraved symbols to guide interpretation. There are no written records, no myths preserved in text. What remains are stones, bones, and silence, inviting but withholding. As the investigation deepens, more speculative ideas quietly surface. Some researchers have wondered whether the circles represent an early, localized tradition of sacred geometry, a precursor to mathematical concepts that would later appear in distant civilizations. The consistent measurements, the circular forms, the possible alignments. Are these merely functional choices, or do they reflect an abstract understanding of space and order? Others propose that the circles marked territorial boundaries or served as gathering points for dispersed groups, reinforcing social cohesion in an increasingly fragile environment. As the climate grew drier, resources would have become scarce and cooperation essential. In this view, the circles were not observatories or calendars, but social anchors, places where identity was reaffirmed through ritual and repetition. And then there are the more unconventional interpretations, often discussed at the fringes of academic discourse. Some suggest that Gebel Ramlah was part of a wider, now lost network of prehistoric sites, connected by shared knowledge and symbolic language across North Africa. If true, these stone circles might represent fragments of a broader system, one that predates dynastic Egypt and challenges assumptions about the isolation of early cultures. Such ideas are difficult to prove and easy to dismiss, yet they persist precisely because the site resists simple explanation. The builders left no instructions, no clear signatures of intent. What they did leave is ambiguity, carefully arranged, enduring ambiguity. What is perhaps most haunting about Gebel Ramlah is its timing. These circles were built on the threshold of environmental collapse. Within centuries, the rains would fade, lakes would vanish, and the Sahara would harden into desert, The people who constructed these stones were witnessing the slow disappearance of their world. Did the circles commemorate what was being lost? Were they acts of remembrance or attempts to impose order on a reality slipping beyond control? Standing among the stones today, one cannot help but feel that they were meant to endure, to hold meaning even after the people themselves were gone. And they have succeeded. Long after the grasslands turned to sand, long after migrations ended, the circles remain, quietly asserting that something important happened here. Yet what exactly remains unanswered? Were these stones practical tools, spiritual symbols, or both? Did they mark time, honor the dead, or encode knowledge meant to survive catastrophe? Or are we projecting complexity onto structures whose meanings were simple, intimate, and forever inaccessible? As the wind continues to pass over Gebel Ramlah, reshaping the desert grain by grain, the circles hold their form. They do not explain themselves. They do not demand belief. They wait, inviting us to consider how much of humanity's earliest understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and meaning may still lie buried beneath the sand, unseen and patiently intact. From the open deserts and fading lakes of North Africa, the path of inquiry bends northeast, following an older corridor of human movement, one carved not by rivers alone, but by memory, migration, and survival. As stone circles and vanished grasslands recede, the landscape tightens, mountains rise, valleys narrow, and in the shadowed folds of the Zagros Range, another chapter of deep prehistory waits in near silence. The site is called Zawi Chemi Shanidar. It lies near the Great Zab River, where rugged limestone cliffs overlook fertile lowlands that once offered shelter, water, and abundance. Even today, the terrain feels protective, enclosed, as though shaped to conceal rather than reveal. Morning mist lingers in the valleys. The rock faces darken with age, and beneath layers of soil and stone, traces of human intention emerge, quiet, fragmentary, and unsettling in their antiquity. Zawi Chemi Shanidar dates to roughly 9,000 to 8,500 BC, a time when humanity stood at a threshold. Ice Age conditions were loosening their grip. Nomadic hunter-gatherers were beginning to experiment with permanence. The world was changing, and so were the people within it. What archaeologists uncovered here was not a city, nor a monument in the later sense, but something arguably more revealing: carefully constructed stone-built structures, rounded, semi-subterranean dwellings, deliberately arranged and repeatedly rebuilt. These were not casual shelters. Their walls were reinforced with stone foundations. Their floors were leveled. Their shapes were consistent. In a world still dominated by movement, these structures suggest pause. The buildings at Zawi Chemi Shanidar are modest in size, yet their planning speaks volumes. Circular or oval in form, they follow a geometry that appears intentional, even standardized. Stones were selected, placed, and adjusted to create stability. Some structures show evidence of internal divisions, hearths and post holes, signs of complex domestic life unfolding within defined space. Mainstream interpretation views these buildings as early sedentary homes, among the first architectural expressions of a lifestyle transitioning away from constant mobility. Here, people may have lived seasonally or semi-permanently, returning year after year to the same place, reinforcing walls rather than abandoning them. But the questions deepen when we look closer. Why circular forms, repeated so consistently? Why invest such effort at a time when survival was still precarious? And why here? The nearby Shanidar Cave, famous for much older Neanderthal burials, adds another layer of gravity to the location. This region had drawn human presence for tens of thousands of years. Knowledge accumulated here, passed silently from generation to generation. Zawi Chemi Shanidar may not have been chosen at random, but inherited. Beyond domestic remains, archaeologists uncovered evidence of communal activity. Animal bones show patterns of selective hunting. Stone tools reveal careful craftsmanship. And notably, there are signs of deliberate ritual behavior, burials, arranged deposits, and the use of pigments like red ochre. These elements blur the line between the practical and the symbolic. Some researchers suggest that Zawi Chemi Shanidar represents an early experiment in social organization. The structures may not have belonged to isolated families, but to a coordinated group, sharing space, resources, and responsibility. The architecture itself could reflect emerging ideas about order, boundaries, and cooperation. Yet others point to details that resist purely functional explanation. The placement of certain buildings, the repetition of proportions, the careful maintenance of spatial relationships, these hint at an awareness of geometry that goes beyond instinct. Not mathematics as later civilizations would define it, but a felt understanding of balance, center, and enclosure. Was this an early language of space? If so, it raises difficult questions. How much abstract thinking existed at this stage of human development? Were these people simply responding to environmental pressures, or were they shaping their world according to internal concepts, ideas about harmony, protection, or even cosmology? Speculation begins quietly here. Some propose that the circular structures symbolized cycles of seasons, life, and renewal. Others suggest they mirrored social structures, reinforcing equality within the group, with no sharp corners, no hierarchy of rooms. A circle, after all, has no beginning and no end. There are also interpretations that frame Zawi Chemi Shanidar as a ritual center rather than a village, a place periodically occupied for ceremonies tied to hunting, fertility, or ancestral memory. The repeated rebuilding of structures on the same footprints could indicate reverence, an insistence on continuity even as generations passed. As the stone circles and mountain shelters of the mainland fade into memory, the journey drifts outward, away from valleys and plateaus, toward the open water. The transition is subtle but profound. Where once humans followed rivers and seasonal routes, they now face the sea. And somewhere beyond the horizon, an island emerges, quiet and resolute, carrying evidence of a decision that would forever alter the human story. Cyprus rises from the eastern Mediterranean like a paused moment in time. Its coastline is edged with pale limestone, its interior shaped by low hills and fertile basins. Today, the island feels familiar, even accessible. But in the deep past, it was something else entirely. Isolated, surrounded by open water, unreachable without intention. On the southern edge of the island, near a seasonal riverbed, lies Shillourokambos. At first, the site appears understated. The ground bears no towering ruins, no dramatic silhouettes against the sky. Instead, there are shallow depressions, low stone foundations, and circular outlines etched faintly into the earth. Yet as the camera settles, the geometry becomes clear. This is not randomness. These are structures, planned, measured, and repeated. Shillourokambos dates to roughly 8,500 to 7,000 BC, placing it among the earliest known Neolithic settlements on Cyprus. Its existence alone raises an immediate question. How did people reach this island so early in prehistory? Cyprus was never connected to the mainland by land bridges. Even during periods of lower sea levels, the journey required seafaring, boats capable of carrying people, animals, tools, and knowledge across open water. The presence of Shillourokambos therefore implies more than settlement. It implies planning, navigation, and foresight. And once arrived, these early settlers did not merely camp. They built. The architecture of Shillourokambos is dominated by circular structures, some partially sunken into the ground, others reinforced with stone foundations and mud brick walls. Their diameters are consistent. Their walls show careful layering. Floors were prepared, leveled, and occasionally resurfaced. This was not improvisation, it was design. Mainstream archaeology interprets these buildings as domestic dwellings, homes for early farming communities who brought with them domesticated animals such as sheep, goats, and pigs, along with cultivated plants. Evidence of wells, hearths, and storage pits suggests daily life unfolding within these spaces, season after season. But the deeper one looks, the more the architecture resists being reduced to mere shelter. Why circles? Circular architecture appears again and again in early Neolithic sites across the region, but at Shillourokambos, the repetition feels almost insistent. Walls curve with precision. Entrances are narrow and controlled. In some cases, structures cluster in ways that suggest planning at a settlement level, not just individual households. Circles are structurally efficient, yes, but they are also symbolic. They enclose without corners. They focus attention inward. They create a center. Some researchers suggest that these forms reflect social values, communal living, shared identity, or equality within the group. Others propose practical reasons tied to climate and materials. But the consistency of the design hints at something learned, transmitted, and preserved. Knowledge traveled here. The stone tools found at Shillourokambos resemble those from mainland sites, indicating cultural continuity. But the adaptation of architecture to an island environment suggests innovation as well. Wells dug deep into the ground, among the earliest known on the island, point to advanced understanding of water management. This was not a tentative experiment. It was confident occupation. Yet, certain elements remain difficult to explain. Some structures appear to have served non-domestic purposes. Their interiors show little evidence of everyday activity. Instead, they contain carefully placed objects, stone tools, animal remains, and in some cases, human burials. The dead were interred within or beneath living spaces, blurring the boundary between the world of the living and the remembered. Was this reverence, ancestral anchoring, or something else entirely? One burial in particular has drawn attention, a human interred alongside a cat, the earliest known association between humans and felines. This detail, quiet yet profound, suggests emotional or symbolic relationships that go beyond survival. It hints at belief systems forming alongside architecture. As with other early sites, speculation grows at the edges of certainty. Some propose that Shillourokambos was not just a settlement but a waypoint, a deliberate outpost in a wider network of early Neolithic expansion across the Mediterranean. If so, its architecture may have served as a template, a reproducible model carried by seafaring groups who already understood geometry, proportion, and spatial organization. Others look to the measurements themselves. While not precise in the modern mathematical sense, the repeated diameters and spatial intervals suggest an intuitive grasp of ratios and planning. Could this be an early form of applied mathematics, used not for abstraction but for stability, memory, and social order? There are even quieter theories, rarely stated outright, that see in these circles a cosmological impulse. The round house as a mirror of the sky, the hearth as a center, the settlement as a mapped universe in miniature. Such ideas cannot be proven, but they persist because the architecture allows them to breathe. What is clear is that Shillourokambos represents a turning point. Humans did not simply arrive on Cyprus, they transformed it. They brought animals that had never existed on the island before. They reshaped ecosystems, and they embedded their presence in stone. This was not survival at the edge of possibility. It was intention made visible. And yet, for all its significance, Shillourokambos remains quiet. It offers no grand monuments, no inscriptions to guide interpretation. Like the sites before it, it speaks through absence, through repetition, through form. As the sea continues to move endlessly around Cyprus, the settlement rests inland, unchanged. Its circles still hold their shape. Its wells remain where hands once reached for water, and its architecture continues to ask questions that have no final answers. What did these builders believe as they crossed open water toward an unseen shore? What knowledge did they carry with them of space, of number, of order? And how much of what we call civilization began not with cities or writing, but with quiet circles built on an island, surrounded by the unknown? If so, its architecture may have served as a template, a reproducible model carried by seafaring groups who already understood geometry, proportion, and spatial organization. Others look to the measurements themselves. While not precise in the modern mathematical sense, the repeated diameters and spatial intervals suggest an intuitive grasp of ratios and planning. Could this be an early form of applied mathematics, used not for abstraction but for stability, memory, and social order? There are even quieter theories, rarely stated outright, that see in these circles a cosmological impulse. The round house as a mirror of the sky, the hearth as a center, the settlement as a mapped universe in miniature. Such ideas cannot be proven, but they persist because the architecture allows them to breathe. What is clear is that Shillourokambos represents a turning point. Humans did not simply arrive on Cyprus, they transformed it. They brought animals that had never existed on the island before. They reshaped ecosystems, and they embedded their presence in stone. This was not survival at the edge of possibility. It was intention made visible. And yet, for all its significance, Shillourokambos remains quiet. It offers no grand monuments, no inscriptions to guide interpretation. Like the sites before it, it speaks through absence, through repetition, through form. As the sea continues to move endlessly around Cyprus, the settlement rests inland, unchanged. Its circles still hold their shape. Its wells remain where hands once reached for water, and its architecture continues to ask questions that have no final answers. What did these builders believe as they crossed open water toward an unseen shore? What knowledge did they carry with them of space, of number, of order? And how much of what we call civilization began not with cities or writing, but with quiet circles built on an island, surrounded by the unknown? From the quiet island shores of the eastern Mediterranean, where circular houses once faced an open sea, the journey turns inward again, back toward the mainland, back toward the high plateaus where mountains, rivers, and volcanic plains converge. The sense of movement is subtle, almost rhythmic, as if following the same ancient paths once taken by early settlers themselves. Beyond the coastlines and crossings lies central Anatolia, a land shaped by fire and stone, where one of the earliest long-term human experiments with permanence quietly unfolded. Here, on a broad plain near the Melendez River, rises a low mound barely distinguishable from the surrounding earth. This is Aşıklı Höyük. At first, it appears unremarkable, a gentle swell in the landscape, softened by centuries of wind and sediment. Snow-capped volcanic peaks linger in the distance. The river bends slowly nearby, its waters steady, dependable. Yet beneath this mound lies layer upon layer of human occupation, compressed into a dense archive of daily life stretching back to roughly 8,500 BC. When excavated, Aşıklı Höyük revealed not a moment, but a process. Unlike sites that show brief occupation or seasonal return, this place was inhabited continuously for nearly 1,000 years. Generations lived, died, rebuilt, and lived again on the same ground. Walls rose and fell, floors were resurfaced, memory accumulated in mud brick and ash. The architecture is immediate and striking. Rectangular buildings crowd tightly together, their walls sharing boundaries, forming a compact mass of rooms and courtyards. There are no streets in the modern sense. Movement appears to have taken place across rooftops, through openings in ceilings, down ladders into enclosed spaces. The settlement feels inward-looking, protective, almost sealed. These were not isolated huts. They were parts of an integrated whole. Mainstream archaeology interprets Aşıklı Höyük as one of the earliest village societies in the region, an early Neolithic community transitioning from foraging to managed food production. Evidence of sheep and goat domestication appears here earlier than in many neighboring areas. Hearths, storage spaces, and work areas suggest specialized tasks distributed throughout the settlement. Yet what sets Aşıklı Höyük apart is not just its age, but its consistency. Over centuries, the same architectural patterns were repeated with remarkable discipline. Buildings follow similar proportions. Wall thicknesses remain consistent. Interior layouts change only gradually. Even as populations grew, the overall structure of the settlement remained stable. Why such rigidity? One explanation is practical. Closely packed buildings conserve heat. Shared walls reduce material use. Rooftop access allows controlled movement and defense. In a harsh environment, efficiency matters. But efficiency alone does not fully explain the adherence to form across so many generations. The people of Aşıklı Höyük were not simply building for survival. They were building according to rules. Inside the houses, the story deepens. Burials were placed beneath floors. Infants, children, adults, all interred within domestic spaces. Life and death coexisted intimately. Ancestors remained present, literally underfoot, woven into the architecture of everyday existence. Some houses contain dozens of burials, others none. This uneven distribution suggests social distinctions that archaeology has not yet fully decoded. Were certain families accorded special status? Were some buildings reserved for ritual, memory, or lineage? Adding to the complexity is evidence of medical intervention. One skull shows signs of trepanation, an early surgical procedure involving the removal of part of the skull. The individual survived the operation. This implies not only anatomical knowledge, but communal care, patience, and trust. Such findings complicate any attempt to portray these people as simple or primitive. Aşıklı Höyük also reveals something unusual for its time, a prolonged resistance to change. While agriculture and new technologies spread rapidly elsewhere, this community adopted them slowly, selectively. Hunting remained important. Architectural innovation was minimal. Traditions were preserved with care. Was this conservatism or intention? Some researchers suggest that Aşıklı Höyük represents an early form of social regulation, where stability was valued over expansion, and change was negotiated cautiously. The architecture itself may have acted as a social framework, reinforcing behavior through space. Narrow rooms limit movement. Shared walls demand cooperation. Repetition reinforces memory. In this view, the village was not just a place to live, but a system, one that shaped thought as much as it sheltered bodies. And then there are the questions that sit just beyond accepted explanation. The precise repetition of building forms has led some to wonder whether early mathematical thinking was already at work. Not numbers as symbols, but proportions as practice. Ratios learned through building, passed down through demonstration rather than instruction. a sense of measurement embedded in muscle memory. Could this be one of the earliest examples of architectural standardization, an inherited spatial logic that predates writing by millennia? Others have looked at the dense layout and suggested symbolic interpretations: the absence of open plazas, the inward focus, the buried dead. Perhaps this was a worldview centered on containment rather than expansion, on the known rather than the unknown. A village designed not to dominate the landscape, but to withdraw from it. There are even more speculative ideas, voiced carefully and without consensus. Some see Aşıklı Höyük as an early experiment that ultimately failed. Skeletal remains show signs of stress, disease, and crowding. Life expectancy was low. By around 7,500 BC, the settlement was abandoned. Why? Did environmental pressures overwhelm the system? Did social rigidity prevent adaptation? Or was the abandonment intentional, a collective decision to move on, to try something new elsewhere? The people left no explanation. They simply departed. What remains is the architecture, compressed, layered, patient. Each wall tells the same story in slightly different ways. Each floor carries traces of footsteps erased thousands of years ago. Standing above the mound today, it is difficult not to sense that Aşıklı Höyük represents something fragile yet profound. Humanity learning how to live together for the long term and discovering the cost of that choice. Was this village a success, sustained for 1,000 years against enormous odds? Or was it a lesson, absorbed silently into the cultural memory of those who came after? As the wind moves across the Anatolian plain and the river continues its slow course, the mound remains still. Beneath it, questions lie stacked like bricks, unanswered, intact, and waiting. How much of our modern world began here, in tight rooms of mud brick and ash? And what other experiments in order, number, and space lie buried nearby, still hidden beneath the surface of time? From the layered streets and mud brick homes of Aşıklı Höyük, the journey of discovery moves eastward, across Anatolia, and into the vast expanses of the South Caucasus. Here, the landscape softens into rolling plains, interrupted by gentle river valleys, a region where early humans could observe the rhythm of water, wind, and sky, and where life began to organize itself with remarkable foresight. It is in this fertile corridor that we encounter a site that exemplifies the emergence of Neolithic complexity, the Göytepe Neolithic complex. The mound rises subtly from the plain, a low earthen swell against the horizon. From a distance, it might be dismissed as just another hill shaped by wind and time. Yet, as one approaches, the surface reveals traces of human endeavor. Layers of soil compacted by generations of footsteps, scattered fragments of stone tools, and the remains of structures carefully aligned and preserved beneath the earth. Göytepe dates to roughly 6,200 to 5,600 BC, placing it squarely in the early Neolithic period, yet already demonstrating the hallmarks of an advanced settlement. Excavations reveal a densely organized complex of mud brick houses, rectangular and often connected, forming a tight network of rooms, courtyards, and narrow passageways. These were not ad hoc constructions. Their dimensions are remarkably consistent, suggesting a level of planning and shared knowledge that reaches beyond mere survival. The architecture is practical, yes, but it is also deliberate in its proportions. Walls are reinforced with compacted earth, floors are leveled and sometimes plastered, and entrances are carefully positioned. In several structures, evidence of storage areas and specialized spaces indicates that life was organized by function. Hearths appear in central rooms, suggesting communal activity and domestic hierarchy. Yet the uniformity of design, repeated across multiple structures, hints at more than efficiency. It points toward a shared vision, a communal understanding of space and order. Artifacts found at Göytepe deepen the intrigue. Pottery shards display incised patterns. Small figurines suggest symbolic or ritualistic practices, and grinding stones indicate careful attention to food production. Animal bones testify to domestication, while the remnants of cultivated grains mark a decisive shift from foraging to early agriculture. The settlement represents a microcosm of human adaptation, a community negotiating survival, social cohesion, and innovation simultaneously. Mainstream archaeology emphasizes Göytepe as a key example of early Neolithic urbanization. Its structures reveal careful planning, technological knowledge, and social coordination. Yet as one delves deeper, the site raises questions that resist easy categorization. The tight clustering of homes, the precise alignment of walls, and the repeated architectural ratios suggest an implicit understanding of measurement. Was there an unspoken system, perhaps even an early form of applied geometry, guiding construction? And if so, how was this knowledge transmitted across generations? The patterning of Göytepe is not purely domestic. Certain buildings are larger, more centrally located, and seem to serve communal or ceremonial functions. These spaces often contain unusual deposits, carefully arranged stones, animal remains, and occasionally artifacts placed in ways that do not align with practical use. The placement appears deliberate, but its meaning is opaque. Were these proto-temples, gathering halls, or markers of social hierarchy? Or did they serve some combination of functions, blending utility with ritual? Speculative theories emerge when one considers the broader landscape. Göytepe is part of a network of early settlements stretching across the South Caucasus, suggesting the possibility of shared architectural conventions, symbolic practices, or trade connections. Some have proposed that the repeated ratios and alignments seen in the settlement indicate more than cultural imitation. They may hint at a regional knowledge system, an early awareness of mathematical or spatial principles embedded within community life. Yet the site also preserves anomalies that defy straightforward explanation. Certain stone arrangements at the periphery do not correspond to dwellings or known functional spaces. They are carefully positioned, yet their purpose remains unclear. Could these be early observational structures, designed to track celestial events or seasonal cycles? Or might they be symbolic markers, embedding memory, ancestry, or belief into the very layout of the settlement? The absence of written records leaves these questions suspended in uncertainty. The interplay between practicality and potential symbolism is what makes Göytepe so compelling. This is a community working to sustain life, while simultaneously experimenting with form, proportion, and perhaps even abstraction. It is a reminder that early Neolithic societies were not merely reactive. They were creative, intentional, and observant. And yet, for all its sophistication, Göytepe also presents evidence of fragility. Environmental pressures, soil depletion, climatic variability, and the challenges of water management likely shaped decisions and constrained growth. The settlement eventually declined, abandoned as communities moved or reorganized elsewhere. What knowledge was lost with its departure? How much of the architectural skill, the social wisdom, and the potential mathematical understanding simply vanished, leaving only fragments for us to reconstruct? Standing above the mound today, one is struck by the silent testimony of human intention. The earth itself bears the imprint of careful design, repeated over generations. Each wall, each courtyard, each carefully laid stone invites us to consider not only what the builders achieved, but how they thought about space, measurement, and community. What principles guided these early architects? Were they intuitive, learned through experience and observation, or codified in ways that have left no trace? How much of our modern conception of mathematics, order, and planning may have roots here in these compact, carefully organized structures? Göytepe remains a puzzle. Its houses speak of daily life, yet also of planning and foresight. Its open spaces suggest social or ritual functions, yet their precise meaning escapes us. And its very existence, so early in human prehistory, challenges assumptions about when and how complexity emerged. As the sun sets over the South Caucasus, casting long shadows across the plain, the mound of Göytepe rests quietly, layered with the accumulated traces of human endeavor. Beneath its surface lies a record of experimentation, adaptation, and perhaps an early understanding of order that hints at questions still unanswered. How did these people conceive of their world? What knowledge guided their hands as they shaped mud, stone, and space? And what secrets remain buried, waiting for future discovery to reveal how deeply mathematics, structure, and human intention were intertwined even before the rise of cities and written history? From the quiet plains of the South Caucasus, where Göytepe's carefully planned houses once traced the rhythm of daily life, the exploration continues southward into the rolling hills and river valleys of the Levant. The landscape shifts, wider expanses, gentler slopes, fertile soil, and the soft, lingering hum of human history stretching back millennia. It is here, amid the undulating terrain of northern Jordan, that one of the earliest known organized settlements emerges: Kharaysin. At first glance, the site is deceptively simple. A low mound rises from the landscape, barely noticeable against the backdrop of scrub and cultivated fields. The earth has been shaped by centuries of wind and rain, smoothing the edges of structures long buried. Yet beneath the surface lies a sprawling settlement, one that whispers of human ingenuity, foresight, and an intricate understanding of space. Kharaysin dates to approximately 7,000 to 6,500 BC, during a transformative period in the pre-pottery Neolithic B era. Here, communities were experimenting with permanent settlement, organized labor, and early agriculture. But Kharaysin, unlike many contemporary sites, reveals an unusually high degree of spatial planning. Excavations uncover streets, pathways, and clusters of mud brick houses arranged with an eye for proportion and orientation. The settlement is not haphazard. It is intentional, almost architectural in its precision. The buildings themselves are rectangular, often sharing walls with their neighbors, creating interconnected compounds. Some structures are subdivided internally, with hearths, storage spaces, and work areas delineated clearly. The repetition of certain dimensions and layouts across multiple buildings suggests a standardization, a shared understanding of measurement, even in the absence of formal units. Was this purely practical, a method for conserving materials and space? Or does it hint at an early form of spatial cognition, a proto-mathematical awareness embedded in architecture itself? Artifacts found at Kharaysin deepen the mystery. Stone tools display a careful craftsmanship, with blade technology refined to an impressive degree. Pottery is rare, yet some fragments show incised patterns, perhaps symbolic or ritualistic. Animal bones indicate domestication, while charred plant remains testify to deliberate cultivation. Life at Kharaysin balanced between subsistence and experimentation, between the predictable rhythms of planting and the unpredictable challenges of early sedentism. Burials add another layer of complexity. Bodies are interred beneath the floors of houses, sometimes accompanied by grave goods, tools, ornaments, or symbolic objects. The dead remained within the settlement, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Such practices raise questions about belief, memory, and the conceptualization of space. Were homes conceived as more than shelter, places where the living and the dead coexisted, where social continuity was literally built into architecture? The layout of Kharaysin also suggests communal planning beyond individual households. Streets appear deliberately maintained, pathways connect clusters of buildings, and open areas may have served as gathering points for ritual or trade. The orientation of structures is not random. Some align with the sun's path or local topography, though the precise reasoning remains unclear. Were these alignments functional, symbolic, or both? Did they reflect an understanding of environmental cycles, a proto-astronomical awareness, or simply tradition passed down through repeated practice? Some researchers propose that Kharaysin represents an early experiment in urban-like organization. Though far smaller than the cities of later millennia, it exhibits hallmarks of social coordination, including shared spaces, standardized building practices, and perhaps even zoning by function. The presence of specialized areas hints at a division of labor and a community capable of long-term planning. And yet, despite the apparent order, the settlement was not immune to the pressures of climate and environment. Evidence of periodic repair and rebuilding suggests adaptation, resilience, and an intimate understanding of the local landscape. Speculative interpretations extend beyond the practical. The regularity of Kharaysin's layout, the repetition of architectural proportions, and the careful positioning of communal spaces invite the possibility that these early inhabitants possessed a conceptual understanding of geometry and proportion. Could these structures have been designed according to principles of balance and symmetry, even in the absence of formal measurement systems? Were these patterns purely functional, or did they encode symbolic meaning, perhaps serving as early frameworks for social cohesion, memory, or even proto-mathematical thought? Other anomalies remain enigmatic. Certain stone arrangements at the periphery of the settlement do not correspond to dwellings or storage areas. Their purpose is uncertain, ritual, territorial, or observational. Some have speculated that such features could have functioned as early markers of time or direction, perhaps assisting in the management of agricultural cycles or seasonal gatherings. The truth, however, remains elusive. Kharaysin also speaks to the human capacity for continuity and inheritance. The settlement's consistency in building style and proportion over generations implies knowledge transfer across decades, if not centuries. Families, craftsmen, and community leaders may have shared unwritten rules governing construction, space, and social organization. This raises profound questions. How did humans encode knowledge before writing? How did they transmit understanding of proportion, alignment, and order across generations? And yet, despite the evidence of planning and sophistication, Kharaysin was ultimately abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental stressors, soil depletion, social pressures, or broader regional migrations may have played a role. What knowledge was lost when these people departed, and how much of it influenced subsequent settlements in the Levant? Today, the mound of Kharaysin rests quietly under the sun, its earthen layers preserving the silent legacy of its inhabitants. Each wall fragment, pathway, and burial tells of a community negotiating life, death, and permanence. The settlement invites reflection not just on what humans built, but on how they thought, how they organized, and how early understanding of space and proportion emerged long before writing, cities, or formal mathematics. How did the inhabitants of Kharaysin conceptualize their world? Did they perceive measurement and proportion as tools, symbols, or something deeper? And what other patterns of knowledge, buried in soil and memory, await discovery, remnants of a prehistoric intelligence that sought order in an uncertain world? Kharaysin endures as a question. Its stones, mud bricks, and pathways offer glimpses of intention, yet resist full comprehension. And it is precisely in this balance, between evidence and mystery, between planning and ambiguity, that the settlement continues to fascinate, inviting us to wonder what still lies hidden, patiently preserved beneath the surface of time. From the fertile plains and river valleys of northern Jordan, where the settlement of Kharaysin once thrived, the journey continues northeast, into the rugged uplands of what is now northern Iraq. Here, the landscape shifts dramatically. Steep valleys cut through limestone hills, seasonal streams wind their way down to broader plains, and volcanic soil enriches the earth. This is a land of contrast, harsh yet abundant, isolated yet connected by ancient human movement. Within this terrain lies a site that would illuminate some of the earliest experiments in permanent human architecture. Jarmo. Jarmo rises subtly from its surroundings, a modest mound amidst rolling hills. From a distance, it seems almost indistinguishable from natural terrain. But closer inspection reveals traces of human determination, layers of compacted soil, remnants of mud brick walls, and carefully placed stone foundations. These are not random. They are deliberate marks left by hands working with both purpose and imagination. Dating to roughly 7,100 to 5,700 BC, Jarmo is considered one of the earliest known Neolithic settlements in the Zagros region. Its discovery revealed not just a community, but a microcosm of human innovation, a place where architecture, agriculture, and social organization converged at a moment when humanity was beginning to redefine itself. The buildings at Jarmo are immediately striking for their regularity. Small, rectangular mud brick structures cluster in close proximity, forming compounds that suggest intentional planning. Shared walls and narrow alleys create a network of interconnected spaces. Floors are leveled, hearths are centralized. Certain rooms appear designated for specific functions, storage, work, or communal gathering. Even within these simple structures, there is evidence of sophisticated spatial understanding. Mainstream archaeology interprets Jarmo as an early agricultural village, where humans transitioned from mobile hunting and gathering to settled life, raising goats, sheep, and wheat. Yet the architecture hints at more than practicality. The repetition of room sizes, wall thicknesses, and spatial arrangements suggests an underlying system of measurement, an intuitive sense of proportion embedded into the very construction of the settlement. Could this represent one of the earliest applications of geometric knowledge in domestic architecture? And if so, how was this knowledge maintained and transmitted across generations? Artifacts found at the site deepen the intrigue. Stone tools are finely crafted, demonstrating both skill and adaptation. Bone implements hint at specialized labor. Pottery, though initially rare, carries incised patterns, perhaps symbolic or decorative. Storage pits and silos indicate foresight and planning for future scarcity, revealing an early understanding of resource management. Every element, from tool to wall, seems to reflect intentionality, a desire to impose order on both the physical and social environment. Yet Jarmo is not just about shelter and sustenance. Burials beneath floors, some accompanied by grave goods, reflect a profound engagement with life and death. Children, adults, and the elderly were laid to rest within their homes, their presence literally woven into the fabric of daily life. This practice suggests that the inhabitants conceived of their dwellings as more than protection from the elements. They were spaces of memory, continuity, and perhaps spiritual resonance. The settlement's layout raises further questions. Some structures appear slightly larger, centrally positioned, or reinforced, possibly serving communal or ceremonial purposes. Were these proto-temples, meeting halls, or the homes of prominent families? Or did they function in multiple capacities, blending the practical with the symbolic? The answer remains elusive, and it is this ambiguity that makes Jarmo both compelling and mysterious. Speculative interpretations of the site extend beyond architecture alone. The consistency of building forms, the clustering of spaces, and the subtle alignment of walls suggest a conceptual understanding of order. Were these early inhabitants experimenting with proportion, symmetry, and modularity, applying principles that could later form the basis of more formalized mathematics? And if so, how conscious were they of these principles and what inspired their application? Other anomalies remain unexplained. Certain stone arrangements beyond the main living areas do not correspond to domestic functions or known ritual activity. Could these have been boundary markers, observational points, or symbolic expressions of social or cosmological ideas? The lack of written records leaves these possibilities tantalizingly open. Jarmo also reflects the fragile balance between human ingenuity and environmental constraints. Evidence of rebuilding and repair throughout the settlement shows both resilience and vulnerability. Soil fertility, water access, and climate would have shaped decisions in construction and resource use. Yet within these constraints, the inhabitants managed to establish continuity over centuries, a testament to observation, adaptation, and perhaps shared communal knowledge. Standing today upon the mound, one cannot help but sense the presence of deliberate intention. Every wall, every hearth, every compacted floor is a trace of thought materialized. The settlement invites reflection on how humans first learned to organize space, to plan for the future, and to encode understanding in physical form. It demonstrates that even before cities, before writing, and before formal mathematics, humans were already negotiating complex relationships between environment, community, and knowledge. And yet, for all its evidence of skill and planning, Jarmo remains enigmatic. Its inhabitants left no written records, no explicit instructions, only enduring patterns of architecture and artifact. How much knowledge was lost with the passage of time? How much of this early understanding of proportion, measurement, and order influenced later societies across Mesopotamia and beyond? As the wind sweeps across the Zagros hills and the sun casts long shadows over compacted mud brick foundations, the mound of Jarmo sits in quiet witness. It speaks without words, offering glimpses of a society striving to bring order to its world. And in that quiet, it asks us to consider, how did these early humans perceive the principles of space, proportion, and permanence? How much remains hidden beneath layers of soil, waiting to reveal the subtle genius of a people whose architectural choices hint at an understanding of the world that continues to intrigue and inspire? Jarmo endures as a question, a quiet testament to early human ingenuity. Its stone and mud brick walls whisper of lives structured, of thought embedded in space, and of knowledge both known and lost. And it is precisely in this tension, between what is visible and what remains unseen, that the settlement continues to fascinate, inviting us to wonder what other insights, buried for millennia, are still waiting beneath the earth. From the rugged foothills and river valleys of northern Mesopotamia, where the settlements of Jarmo reveal early experiments in stone and mud brick, the journey now moves westward, across the Mediterranean to the lush forested shores of northeastern Iberia. Here, the landscape softens into gentle hills and fertile plains, punctuated by tranquil waterways. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of pine and fresh water, and in the distance, the surface of a lake catches the sunlight, shimmering like glass. It is along this quiet water's edge that one of Europe's earliest Neolithic settlements emerges, La Draga. At first, La Draga appears deceptively simple. From the modern perspective, the site is barely visible, a stretch of lakeshore, overgrown with reeds and grasses, interrupted by occasional mounds and depressions. Yet beneath these unassuming contours lies a complex human landscape, meticulously constructed and remarkably preserved. Excavations reveal a settlement built on wooden platforms and sunken into the soft soil of the lakeshore, where water and land met in careful balance. La Draga dates to approximately 5,250 to 5,000 BC, placing it within the early Neolithic of the Western Mediterranean. Its discovery revealed more than a lakeside village. It unveiled an intricate society negotiating its environment with both practicality and ingenuity. The architecture is immediately striking. Houses are rectangular and constructed primarily from timber, with posts anchored into the lakebed or marshy soil, supporting walls of wattle and daub and roofs that would have sheltered inhabitants from wind and rain. The settlement was designed for stability despite its watery setting, an early expression of engineering applied to the challenges of a delicate ecosystem. Mainstream archaeology interprets La Draga as a community of early farmers and fishers, exploiting the rich resources of the lake and surrounding forests. Stone tools, including polished axes and flint blades, indicate woodworking and hunting. Charred plant remains suggest the cultivation of wheat and barley. Fish bones, mollusk shells, and wild plant remains illustrate a diet drawn from both domesticated and natural sources. Yet these practical elements are only one layer of a more complex picture. The layout of the settlement hints at intentional planning. Houses are organized in neat rows, with pathways between them, and platforms rise above waterlogged ground, suggesting awareness of seasonal flooding or fluctuating lake levels. Certain structures appear larger or more centrally located, possibly indicating communal or ritual functions. The regularity of post spacing and platform construction suggests a careful understanding of measurement, balance, and proportion, even without standardized units. Could these early architects have been experimenting with concepts that echo in later European Neolithic mathematics and geometry? Inside the houses, life appears structured and detailed. Storage pits, hearths, and work areas reflect domestic routines, while carefully crafted objects hint at aesthetic and symbolic concerns. Bone and antler tools are polished and decorated. Ornaments made from shells and stones suggest personal adornment or social signaling. In some houses, the arrangement of objects seems deliberate, hinting at ritual or symbolic practice intertwined with daily life. Yet La Draga also presents mysteries that resist conventional explanation. The settlement's construction on wooden piles raises questions about engineering knowledge and spatial reasoning. How were posts measured, aligned, and maintained over time in a setting subject to decay and water pressure? How did the inhabitants coordinate communal building efforts, sharing knowledge, and maintaining consistency across multiple structures? The precision of the layout implies not only technical skill but social organization capable of sustaining complex projects over decades. Some researchers propose that La Draga was more than a practical settlement. Certain platforms and clusters of posts may have served ritual or symbolic purposes. Objects placed intentionally within floors, patterns of post alignment, and unusual arrangements of stones hint at a worldview that intertwined the human, natural, and possibly spiritual realms. Were these early inhabitants encoding meaning into their very architecture, marking identity, memory, or cosmology in the placement of timber and stone? The lakeside environment itself amplifies the enigma. Water preserves, but also transforms. Organic materials, normally lost to time, survive in La Draga's wet soils. Wooden structures, tools, and even plant remains endure with remarkable clarity. This preservation allows glimpses into early Neolithic technology, but also deepens the questions. How much knowledge did these people possess of wood preservation, water management, and settlement durability? And how much of their expertise has been lost, leaving only fragments for modern interpretation? La Draga's architecture also invites speculation about social complexity. Repetition of house dimensions, careful post placement, and alignment of pathways suggest rules, perhaps unwritten, passed from generation to generation. Did these early builders develop a shared system of proportions, a visual and practical language of construction? Could such a system represent an early form of applied mathematics, encoded not in symbols, but in the very fabric of the settlement? Yet, for all its sophistication, La Draga remains a fragile site. Eventually, the settlement was abandoned, likely due to changes in water levels, environmental pressures, or social reorganization. What knowledge departed with the inhabitants? How much of their architectural and technical skill influenced other Neolithic communities in Iberia and beyond? Standing today on the modern lakeshore, one can imagine the settlement at its height. Platforms rising above the water, timber walls aligned with care, smoke curling from central hearths, and families navigating a world carefully structured by both necessity and design. Each post, each plank, each pathway is a trace of thought materialized in wood and earth, a testament to human intention, ingenuity, and the subtle integration of mathematics into daily life long before formal measurement existed. And yet, for all its clarity, La Draga resists final understanding. Its buildings, objects, and layout offer clues but no answers. How did these people conceive proportion, balance, and structure? Were certain platforms imbued with meaning beyond the practical? And what other innovations, now vanished, shaped the lives of these early lakeside settlers? La Draga remains a question suspended in time, a place where human effort, observation, and design converge along the edge of a lake. Its preserved remains invite us to reflect on the ingenuity of early Neolithic communities, the silent knowledge embedded in timber and earth, and the mysteries that survive millennia, patiently waiting beneath water and soil for discovery. From the fertile lake shores of La Draga, where timber platforms once rose above still waters and early Neolithic communities experimented with proportion and structure, our journey moves south and deep into the heart of the Sahara. Here, the landscape shifts dramatically. Open desert stretches to the horizon, punctuated by rocky plateaus, isolated hills, and the occasional dry riverbed. It is a harsh, unforgiving environment today, yet hidden within its folds lie traces of a dramatically different past, a time when life in this region thrived, shaped by water, migration, and ingenuity. In the remote Libyan Sahara, we find one of the most enigmatic prehistoric sites, Muhuggiag. The site itself is perched in a rocky gully, partially sheltered by cliffs that rise like silent sentinels above the arid plain. From a distance, the structures appear as simple piles of stone, blending almost seamlessly with the natural landscape. Yet closer inspection reveals their intentionality. Low walls, circular enclosures, and aligned stone formations hint at purpose, echoing human thought and labor across millennia. The sun casts long shadows over these constructions, emphasizing their shape and rhythm, and inviting the observer to ponder their origin and meaning. Muhuggiag is remarkable for both its age and its contents. Radiocarbon dating places occupation and construction at around 5000 to 4000 BC, though some materials may be older. The site contains not only stone-built structures, but also evidence of burials, ritual activity, and surprisingly sophisticated artifacts, including finely crafted pottery, tools, and even fragments of textiles. This combination suggests a society negotiating both daily survival and deeper symbolic or ceremonial concerns. The stone structures themselves are modest yet deliberate. Circular enclosures, sometimes reinforced with stone slabs, hint at dwellings or communal spaces. Certain alignments suggest an understanding of orientation, possibly in relation to the sun or surrounding topography. While the stones are simple and unworked, their placement is purposeful, implying knowledge of stability, spacing, and proportion. How did these people determine the best configuration for their structures? Was it intuition, observation, or an early form of applied geometry embedded in practice rather than theory? Within the site, archaeologists uncovered burials that deepen the mystery. Some graves contained multiple individuals, sometimes accompanied by objects such as beads, ornaments, or carved stones. One of the most famous discoveries is a female skeleton, remarkable for her deliberate burial posture and the inclusion of ceremonial items. These burials, positioned within or near stone enclosures, suggest a connection between architecture, community, and memory, a spatial embodiment of life and death intertwined. The artifacts found at Muhuggiag reveal a degree of craftsmanship unexpected in such a seemingly austere environment. Stone tools are finely shaped, pottery carries incised designs, and evidence of pigment suggests symbolic or ritual practice. Even more striking are traces of figurative art, rock paintings and carvings within the vicinity depicting humans, animals, and abstract forms. These artistic expressions, coupled with the stone structures, indicate that this was more than a temporary camp. It was a place of sustained human intention and cultural complexity. Speculative interpretations arise naturally. Some researchers suggest that Muhuggiag served as a ritual center for nomadic or semi-nomadic groups, a place visited seasonally for ceremonies related to fertility, death, or celestial observation. Others propose that the site represents an early experiment in sedentism, a rare attempt to create enduring space in an otherwise mobile society. The careful placement of stones, the repetition of circular forms, and the orientation of certain enclosures may hint at early symbolic or even mathematical thinking, an understanding of symmetry, proportion, or alignment that resonates with other prehistoric constructions across Africa and beyond. The environment itself amplifies the enigma. Today, the Sahara is largely inhospitable, yet during the Holocene, this region supported lakes, rivers, and abundant vegetation. How did climate shape the architecture and social organization at Muhuggiag? Did the inhabitants observe cycles of water and seasonality, adapting their stone structures accordingly? Were some enclosures designed to channel or store water, or to align with solar events marking time and survival? The answers are tantalizingly elusive. What makes Muhuggiag particularly fascinating is the sense that it embodies knowledge that straddles the practical and the abstract. The inhabitants clearly understood how to construct stable, enduring forms in stone, while also embedding meaning into those forms through placement, orientation, and association with burials and art. Was this knowledge purely functional? Or did it hint at an early comprehension of proportion and order? A form of applied mathematics emerging naturally from observation and necessity. The site also raises questions about cultural continuity and exchange. The presence of similar architectural forms and symbolic artifacts across the Sahara and into the Nile Valley suggests connections between distant communities, even in a period before the rise of urban centers. Did ideas about construction, proportion, and ceremonial space travel alongside people and trade goods? Or did similar solutions emerge independently, reflecting shared human instincts for order and meaning in the built environment? Standing at Muhuggiag today, amid the stillness of the desert, it is easy to feel the weight of time. The stones remain, steadfast and silent, bearing witness to human thought and labor thousands of years ago. Each circle, each aligned wall, each burial challenges us to consider the intelligence and intention behind what might seem like simple structures. These were people not only surviving in a demanding landscape, but shaping it, recording memory, and expressing ideas through space and form. And yet, despite centuries of excavation and research, Muhuggiag keeps many of its secrets. How precisely were the stones measured, aligned, and maintained? What rituals were performed within these enclosures, and how were they connected to broader patterns of social organization? How much knowledge, technical, symbolic, or mathematical, has been lost to time, leaving only tantalizing traces? Muhuggiag endures as both a place and a question, a window into the ingenuity, creativity, and subtle understanding of early Saharan societies. Its stones speak quietly, revealing glimpses of order, proportion, and ritual, yet refusing to divulge their full meaning. And it is precisely in this tension between evidence and mystery that the site continues to captivate, inviting us to ponder what other knowledge, buried in sand and stone, may still await discovery. What makes Muhuggiag particularly fascinating is the sense that it embodies knowledge that straddles the practical and the abstract. The inhabitants clearly understood how to construct stable, enduring forms in stone, while also embedding meaning into those forms through placement, orientation, and association with burials and art. Was this knowledge purely functional, or did it hint at an early comprehension of proportion and order? A form of applied mathematics emerging naturally from observation and necessity. The site also raises questions about cultural continuity and exchange. The presence of similar architectural forms and symbolic artifacts across the Sahara and into the Nile Valley suggests connections between distant communities, even in a period before the rise of urban centers. Did ideas about construction, proportion, and ceremonial space travel alongside people and trade goods? Or did similar solutions emerge independently, reflecting shared human instincts for order and meaning in the built environment? Standing at Muhuggiag today, amid the stillness of the desert, it is easy to feel the weight of time. The stones remain, steadfast and silent, bearing witness to human thought and labor thousands of years ago. Each circle, each aligned wall, each burial challenges us to consider the intelligence and intention behind what might seem like simple structures. These were people not only surviving in a demanding landscape, but shaping it, recording memory, and expressing ideas through space and form. And yet, despite centuries of excavation and research, Muhuggiag keeps many of its secrets. How precisely were the stones measured, aligned, and maintained? What rituals were performed within these enclosures, and how were they connected to broader patterns of social organization? How much knowledge, technical, symbolic, or mathematical, has been lost to time, leaving only tantalizing traces? Muhuggiag endures as both a place and a question, a window into the ingenuity, creativity, and subtle understanding of early Saharan societies. Its stones speak quietly, revealing glimpses of order, proportion, and ritual, yet refusing to divulge their full meaning. And it is precisely in this tension between evidence and mystery that the site continues to captivate, inviting us to ponder what other knowledge, buried in sand and stone, may still await discovery. Wadi Faynan challenges assumptions about the scale and sophistication of early human architecture. These are not monumental structures, yet their repetition, alignment, and proportion hint at advanced planning. They suggest that prehistoric societies, even in marginal environments, were capable of abstract thought and long-term organization. Were these people experimenting with early forms of spatial mathematics, encoding principles of balance and symmetry in the very fabric of their environment? Or were the circles primarily social and symbolic, a means of structuring human interaction and memory? Standing amid the quiet stone rings today, one senses both the intention and the mystery embedded in the landscape. Each circle, hearth, and pit is a trace of human presence, carefully placed and patiently maintained. The structures speak of observation, planning, and continuity, yet resist full interpretation. They leave us with questions. How were the circles measured and aligned? What social or ritual practices unfolded within their bounds? And how much of this knowledge, now lost, influenced the broader Neolithic world? Wadi Faynan endures as both a place and a puzzle. Its stone circles, simple yet precise, reveal glimpses of human ingenuity, community organization, and perhaps early mathematical understanding. And in their quiet, enduring presence, they invite us to wonder about the ingenuity of prehistoric societies and the knowledge still hidden beneath the sands of time, waiting for discovery. From the arid valleys of Wadi Faynan, where circular stone enclosures silently record the rhythm of prehistoric life and early attempts at geometric order, our journey turns north and east, crossing continents and climates to the wetlands and shallow lakes of Eastern Europe. Here, the landscape is softer, marshes interlaced with rivers, broad meadows dotted with reeds, and the occasional grove of birch or alder. Amid these watery expanses lies a site that speaks to a different form of ingenuity. Veksa, a settlement defined not by stone walls, but by the delicate persistence of timber, elevated above the marshy ground on carefully constructed wooden platforms. At first glance, Veksa seems almost ephemeral. From the modern perspective, one might see only irregular mounds, the suggestion of posts or depressions in soft soil. Yet, beneath this fragile veneer, the settlement reveals an extraordinary example of human adaptation and architectural foresight. Timber, vulnerable to decay in many environments, was preserved here in waterlogged soil, allowing us to glimpse the layout of a village built entirely on platforms suspended above the wetlands. These structures are a testimony to both practical problem-solving and a sophisticated understanding of materials and environment. Veksa dates to roughly 5,200 to 4,700 BC, placing it firmly within the Neolithic, at a time when communities across Europe were transitioning from simple villages to organized settlements, experimenting with construction techniques and social organization. The wooden platforms, often rectangular and meticulously aligned, suggest that these were not temporary structures or makeshift shelters. They were homes, workspaces, and communal areas, designed for durability in a challenging environment. Posts sunk deep into the marsh supported floors above water, while walls of wattle and daub or bundled reeds likely provided enclosure. Each platform represents a deliberate response to the landscape, an early exercise in engineering applied to the needs of everyday life. The layout of the settlement hints at careful planning. Platforms cluster in irregular yet coherent patterns, connected by raised walkways or narrow causeways. Open spaces between structures may have served as communal areas, pathways for movement, or even spaces for ritual or social gathering. The repetition of platform sizes and alignments suggests shared knowledge and construction norms. Were these arrangements purely functional, dictated by water levels and soil stability? Or did they also reflect social conventions, hierarchies, or symbolic considerations encoded in the very fabric of the settlement? Artifacts recovered from Veksa deepen the intrigue. Stone tools, finely knapped and shaped, indicate woodworking and domestic labor. Polished bone implements reveal craft specialization, while traces of ceramics, some simple, some decorated, suggest aesthetic sensibilities and cultural expression. Evidence of plant cultivation and animal management underscores the community's connection to both wild and domesticated resources. Yet for all its practical richness, the settlement's architecture hints at more than necessity. It reflects foresight, repetition, and an understanding of proportion. The platforms were not placed haphazardly. They were aligned, spaced, and sized with care, suggesting an early grasp of modular design. Could this be an unconscious application of geometry, a tactile and observational precursor to formalized measurement? Veksa also challenges our assumptions about permanence and human adaptation. Building in waterlogged areas requires both anticipation and maintenance. Timber decays, posts shift, floors sag. Yet the builders of Veksa not only constructed resilient platforms, they did so repeatedly, sustaining the settlement over generations. How did they manage materials, coordinate labor, and transmit construction knowledge across decades? Were these practices recorded in memory, in hands-on instruction, or in unwritten conventions that structured both work and daily life? Speculative interpretations arise naturally when considering anomalies within the site. Certain platforms appear larger or more centrally positioned, while some depressions suggest ritual or ceremonial use. Could these elevated spaces have served as gathering halls, ritual centers, or focal points for seasonal events? Some archaeologists suggest that the arrangement of platforms may encode principles of symmetry or alignment, hinting at an early form of spatial reasoning. Did the builders intuitively apply ratios and proportion, or was their knowledge the result of careful observation and experimentation across generations? The environmental context of Veksa further amplifies its mystery. Situated above wetlands and shallow lakes, the settlement required constant awareness of water levels, soil conditions, and seasonal changes. Was construction timed to correspond with dry seasons or periods of lower water? Did the community monitor rainfall, river flow, and marsh ecology with the precision necessary to maintain the structural integrity of their homes? And in doing so, did they develop an early understanding of environmental cycles, encoded into the architecture itself? Veksa also raises intriguing questions about social organization. The regularity of platforms and communal pathways suggests coordination and shared knowledge. Could early rules for spacing, post-placement, or alignment reflect social norms or hierarchies? Perhaps certain platforms were reserved for prominent families or for communal functions, while others housed smaller domestic units. In this sense, architecture at Veksa may have been both a practical and social tool, a means of structuring human interaction in addition to providing shelter. Artifacts hint at symbolic and cultural life as well. Polished stones, decorated bone implements, and even early figurines suggest that creativity and ritual were interwoven with the practical demands of settlement. Did the placement of certain platforms, the orientation of walkways, or the organization of open spaces carry meaning beyond the material? Was the village itself a symbolic landscape, a stage for both daily labor and human expression? Standing today along the preserved waterlogged margins, one can almost envision Veksa at its height. Timber posts rising from the marsh, floors suspended above water, families moving along narrow walkways, and smoke curling from hearths in the early morning light. Each platform, each post, each alignment carries a story of observation, ingenuity, and the subtle application of proportion and measurement. The settlement embodies both the practical challenges of life in a wetland and the abstract sophistication of early human cognition, showing that even in environments demanding adaptation, humans were capable of remarkable architectural foresight. Yet for all its evidence of ingenuity, Veksa remains enigmatic. How precisely were the platforms aligned and measured? How did knowledge of construction spread through the community? And how was it preserved across generations? Were certain structures imbued with symbolic significance, or were they purely functional? And, perhaps most tantalizingly, did these early builders unconsciously encode mathematical principles into their elevated designs, leaving a precursor to formalized measurement in timber and earth? Veksa endures as a question etched into wetlands and soil. Its wooden platforms, preserved against the ravages of time, whisper of human adaptation, organization, and subtle understanding of space. Each post, plank, and walkway offers a glimpse into a community negotiating both environment and social structure, blending practicality with intention. And in this quiet persistence, Veksa challenges us to consider the depth of prehistoric knowledge, the ingenuity of early builders, and the mysteries still waiting beneath centuries of water and sediment, patiently preserved for discovery. From the wetlands of Veksa, where elevated wooden platforms hint at early experiments in environmental adaptation and spatial organization, the journey of discovery now turns southward to the sun-baked Aegean coastline of modern-day Turkey. Here, the land meets the sea in a blend of rocky cliffs, sandy beaches, and fertile terraces that have supported human activity for millennia. Nestled on one of these coastal terraces lies a site that offers a window not only into settlement life, but into the very mechanics of early industry and craft, Çukuriçi Höyük. The mound rises subtly from the surrounding plain, a low but unmistakable prominence amid olive groves and cultivated fields. From a distance, it appears unassuming, an ordinary hill shaped by centuries of wind, rain, and human habitation. Yet beneath its surface lies a layered chronicle of Neolithic and Chalcolithic occupation, revealing not only homes and communal spaces, but the specialized spaces of early craft production. Here, at Çukuriçi Höyük, stone workshops speak to an intricate understanding of material, technique, and organization, challenging assumptions about the scope of prehistoric human capability. Çukuriçi Höyük dates to around 6,500 to 4,500 BC, making it contemporary with many of the earliest settlements in the Aegean and Anatolia. Excavations reveal compact domestic structures, carefully constructed from stone and mud brick, yet interspersed among these dwellings are workshop areas where raw materials were transformed into tools, ornaments, and functional objects. The evidence suggests a society capable of both domestic stability and industrial specialization, a duality that hints at advanced planning and shared knowledge. The workshops themselves are remarkable for their organization and apparent logic. Stone cores, flakes, and partially worked pieces cluster in discrete areas, suggesting deliberate spatial division between workspaces and living spaces. Hearths and grinding stones are present in some workshop areas, indicating processes that required heat, abrasion, and controlled effort. Tools show signs of repeated refinement, indicating not only skill, but also an understanding of sequential processes, an early form of technological thinking that presupposes planning, measurement, and foresight. Stone, obsidian, and flint artifacts dominate the assemblage, yet their sourcing raises questions. Obsidian fragments found at Çukuriçi Höyük can be traced to distant volcanic regions across the Aegean, implying long-distance exchange networks or trade connections. How did these materials arrive here, and what systems were in place to manage, store, and process them? Were certain workshops specialized according to material or technique, reflecting an understanding of the properties of stone that borders on early engineering knowledge? The arrangement of the workshops also hints at an early awareness of proportion and space. Work areas are often rectangular or roughly linear, aligned with surrounding dwellings or pathways. Post holes in stone settings indicate that some tools may have been mounted or stabilized for repetitive tasks. Could these arrangements reflect an intuitive grasp of geometry, a recognition of angles, leverage, and alignment? Or were they purely functional, developed through trial and error, yet still demonstrating a remarkably consistent logic across multiple generations? Beyond technical skill, Çukuriçi Höyük suggests a symbolic or cultural dimension to production. Some areas contain deliberately placed objects, finished tools, shaped stones, or fragments that seem to have been arranged intentionally rather than discarded randomly. Were these early display areas, perhaps reflecting pride in craftsmanship, ritual significance, or social communication through material culture? The boundaries between daily labor, technology, and symbolic practice appear fluid, challenging the modern tendency to separate function from meaning. The environmental setting amplifies the site's mystery. Located near the coast, Çukuriçi Höyük offered access to marine resources, fertile land, and trade routes. How did the inhabitants coordinate settlement planning, workshop placement, and access to raw materials in such a landscape? Did the proximity to the sea influence the orientation of workshops or dwellings, and were certain areas purposefully elevated or reinforced to manage seasonal floods or storms? The evidence points to a nuanced understanding of terrain, suggesting that spatial reasoning extended beyond individual structures to encompass the broader environment. Speculative theories naturally arise when examining these stone workshops. Some have proposed that the precision and repetition evident in the arrangement of tools and workspaces reflect early experimentation with standardization, a form of proto-industrial organization that hints at mathematical thinking. Could measurements of workspace, the spacing of tool racks, or even the angles of worked stones reflect a conceptual understanding of proportion and replication? While evidence is incomplete, the possibility invites reflection on the cognitive capacities of Neolithic artisans. Moreover, the workshops may hint at social stratification or specialization. Were certain families or groups responsible for particular tasks? Did the community organize labor according to skill, age, or social role? The spatial separation of workshops from dwellings suggests an awareness of efficiency and organization, as well as the potential for knowledge transmission across generations. In this sense, Çukuriçi Höyük can be seen not only as a domestic settlement, but as an early center of applied knowledge, a place where observation, experimentation, and precision intersected. Burials and associated ritual activity further complicate the picture. Skeletons found in or near dwelling areas sometimes include artifacts associated with production, such as unfinished tools or specialized implements. This integration of life, labor, and death raises profound questions about how these early societies conceived of work, skill, and memory. Were tools and workshops imbued with social or spiritual meaning, or were they entirely functional? Or was there a deliberate overlap, where the act of creation itself held symbolic weight? Standing at Çukuriçi Höyük today, the silence of the terraces and stone walls invites contemplation. One can imagine early artisans working under the Aegean sun, shaping obsidian, polishing flint, and arranging their spaces with both intention and care. Every stone chipped, every tool refined, and every workspace arranged carries the imprint of human cognition, planning, proportion, and experimentation emerging from a practical and cultural imperative. Yet, for all the clarity of evidence, Çukuriçi Höyük retains its mysteries. How precise were the measurements guiding tool production? What knowledge of material properties, angles, and leverage did these early artisans possess? How were skills transmitted? And how much of this expertise disappeared with the passage of time? And, perhaps most intriguingly, does the organization of these workshops hint at a prehistoric understanding of order and proportion that parallels, in principle, later mathematical thought? Çukuriçi Höyük endures as both a site and a question, where the echoes of stone tools, wooden benches, and carefully arranged spaces whisper of ingenuity, observation, and deliberate design. Its workshops reveal the intersection of labor, skill, and thought, offering glimpses of early human understanding that reach beyond the domestic into the conceptual. And in this quiet persistence, the site challenges us to consider how much of prehistoric knowledge remains hidden, patiently preserved in layers of stone, soil, and human intention, waiting to be uncovered. From the sun-drenched terraces of Çukuriçi Höyük, where stone workshops whisper of early specialization, craftsmanship, and the subtle application of proportion, our exploration shifts once more, this time back to the Anatolian plateau, to a site whose contours reveal the quiet complexity of one of the earliest Neolithic settlements, Aşıklı Höyük. While the central mound has long captured scholarly attention, it is the peripheral buildings, those surrounding the main cluster of homes, that offer a unique window into the social, architectural, and perhaps even mathematical imagination of its inhabitants. Approaching the outskirts of Aşıklı Höyük, the landscape appears deceptively simple. Gentle slopes, punctuated by low rises and depressions, stretch into the distance. From above, one might see a series of rectangular or irregular mounds, the remains of walls pressed into the soil, faint lines of stone, and patches of compacted earth. These are the peripheral buildings, structures that sit at the edges of the main settlement, quieter than the central dwellings, yet no less deliberate in construction. The careful spacing of these structures, their orientation in relation to the main mound, and the recurrence of specific dimensions hint at intention beyond mere habitation. Dating to roughly 8,200 to 7,400 BC, Aşıklı Höyük stands among the earliest known permanent villages in Anatolia. Excavations of peripheral buildings have revealed smaller rooms, storage spaces, and possible workshops, each constructed from red volcanic stone and packed earth, sometimes with evidence of post holes suggesting light superstructures. These buildings, though less monumental than central houses, were meticulously planned. Floors were leveled, walls reinforced, and spaces organized with remarkable consistency across multiple structures. Why were these buildings constructed in the periphery, and what does their arrangement reveal about the relationship between central and marginal spaces in early human settlements? One of the most intriguing features of the peripheral structures is their apparent functional diversity. Some rooms contain hearths, others storage pits, while a few show traces of specialized activities, perhaps craft production, food processing, or ritual practice. Yet there is also an elegance to the layout, repeated proportions, alignments with the central mound, and patterns in wall thickness and spacing. Could these architectural choices reflect an early understanding of modularity and proportion, even if only intuitive? Were the peripheral buildings intended as functional complements to the main dwellings, or did they serve a symbolic or organizational purpose within the settlement's social structure? Artifacts found within these peripheral structures hint at both daily life and specialized activity. Flint tools, polished stone implements, and evidence of grinding and carving suggest that some peripheral rooms were workspaces, possibly for producing tools, food, or decorative objects. The spatial organization indicates a sophisticated separation of domestic, production, and communal functions, raising the question of whether Aşıklı Höyük's inhabitants were already experimenting with early urban planning principles. How did they decide which activities belonged in the center and which at the edges? Was this division practical, symbolic, or a combination of both? The peripheral buildings also reveal insights into the movement and coordination of people. Narrow alleys, carefully spaced pathways, and the orientation of doorways suggest that the architects considered circulation and access. Certain buildings appear to be aligned with topographical features or solar orientation, implying an awareness of both environment and light. Were these alignments coincidental, or do they reflect a deliberate effort to impose order upon the landscape? Could the spatial organization of peripheral structures encode knowledge about measurement, proportion, or even early mathematical reasoning, expressed physically through walls and pathways rather than symbols or writing? Speculative interpretations emerge when considering anomalies in the peripheral buildings. Some enclosures appear unusually isolated or empty, lacking clear domestic traces. Others show repetitive patterns of post holes or hearths that do not correspond to immediate practical use. Were these spaces reserved for ceremonial or communal functions, or perhaps experimental forms of construction and spatial arrangement? Could the peripheral buildings have functioned as laboratories for architectural ideas, testing proportions, alignments, and construction methods before implementing them in the main mound? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, leaving room for imagination alongside fact. Environmental context deepens the mystery. Peripheral buildings often occupy slightly elevated ground, perhaps chosen to avoid seasonal flooding or to maintain visibility across the settlement. Proximity to volcanic stone sources and arable land may have influenced placement, yet the consistency of orientation and proportion suggests choices guided by more than mere practicality. Did the builders of Aşıklı Höyük perceive and manipulate space according to principles of order and symmetry? Were these principles learned through observation and passed down, or were they part of a collective cultural understanding embedded in construction practices? Another layer of intrigue comes from human remains. Burials near or within peripheral buildings suggest that these spaces were not merely functional, but carried social or symbolic significance. Some graves include carefully arranged stones or objects, hinting at ritual or memorial practices connected to the structures themselves. How did the spatial arrangement of peripheral buildings relate to concepts of life, death, and memory in early Anatolian society? Were these edges of the settlement reserved for reflection, observation, or even ceremonial activities, complementing the domestic life of the central mound? Standing at the site today, it is easy to feel the intentionality woven into the peripheral structures. Each wall, post hole, and hearth represents a choice of size, shape, placement, and alignment. Even in their modesty, these buildings carry an echo of thoughtfulness and foresight. The peripheral buildings, quieter than the main mound, suggest that early communities were thinking beyond immediate necessity, experimenting with spatial organization, proportion, and perhaps early applications of measurement in a physical form. Yet, for all that has been uncovered, the peripheral buildings of Aşıklı Höyük retain an aura of mystery. How precisely were dimensions determined? Were alignments guided by practical, social, or cosmological reasoning? Did the arrangement of edges and margins encode knowledge lost to time, a silent understanding of proportion and space that complements the daily life of the main settlement? And how much of this architectural insight influenced later Anatolian and Mesopotamian communities, forming a hidden thread in the development of urban planning and structured construction? Aşıklı Höyük's peripheral buildings endure as both tangible structures and open questions, silent witnesses to human experimentation, observation, and organization. Their careful proportions, alignment, and function invite us to consider the minds that conceived them, the hands that built them, and the societies that maintained them. They remind us that even on the margins of settlements, prehistoric humans engaged deeply with space, material, and social life, leaving traces that challenge our understanding and ignite our curiosity. And in their quiet presence, we are invited to wonder, what other knowledge, encoded in walls, floors, and alignments, might still lie hidden beneath the soil, waiting to reveal the full scope of human ingenuity at Aşıklı Höyük. From the carefully aligned peripheral buildings of Aşıklı Höyük, where early Anatolian communities experimented with proportion, organization, and the subtleties of spatial arrangement, our journey now stretches across the Red Sea highlands into the rugged landscapes of the Horn of Africa. Here, amidst sweeping valleys and eroded escarpments, lies one of the most remarkable prehistoric sites in eastern Africa, Porc-Epicé. It is a place where stone structures rise quietly from the arid terrain, and where early humans left behind evidence of labor, ritual, and perhaps an understanding of architecture that challenges conventional expectations for the period. Porc-Epicé is nestled on a rocky promontory, overlooking a valley that stretches toward distant hills, its surface marked by scattered stones and shallow depressions. The site appears austere at first, almost as if nature and human hands conspired to camouflage it. But closer inspection reveals structures built from large stones, sometimes roughly dressed, sometimes placed with astonishing precision. Circular and rectangular enclosures emerge from the landscape, their walls carefully composed, their form deliberate. The sun casts sharp shadows over these stone arrangements, revealing lines and curves that speak to design, intent, and a quiet mathematical sensibility. Dating back to approximately 4,500 to 3,000 BC, Porc-Epicé is often associated with the early pastoral Neolithic of the Horn of Africa. Excavations have uncovered stone-built structures alongside hearths, storage pits, and burial sites, indicating that this was not a transient camp but a place of extended occupation. The settlement demonstrates a sophisticated approach to construction. Stones were selected for size and shape, arranged to form stable enclosures and sometimes aligned in ways that suggest awareness of orientation, perhaps in relation to the sun or surrounding landscape. What drove these choices? Were they purely functional, or was there an element of aesthetic or symbolic reasoning embedded in the design? The circular and rectangular forms of the structures at Porc-Epicé suggest a remarkable understanding of proportion. Walls are carefully spaced, sometimes forming concentric circles, sometimes framing interior spaces for domestic, ritual, or storage purposes. In some areas, stone platforms rise slightly above the surrounding terrain, suggesting preparation for elevated floors or defined activity zones. Such precision raises compelling questions. How did these early communities measure and arrange space without written units or standardized tools? Were these arrangements intuitive, passed down through tradition and observation, or evidence of an early applied sense of geometry? Artifacts found within the enclosures hint at a combination of everyday life and more specialized activity. Stone tools, including axes, scrapers, and grinding stones, indicate domestic labor, woodworking, and food processing. But alongside these utilitarian objects are items that suggest symbolic or ceremonial significance: beads, carved stones, and unusually placed objects within or near walls. Were some structures designed primarily for ritual or social gatherings, while others served practical needs? Could the careful placement of stones and objects reflect an early form of coded communication, a language of space, proportion, and meaning embedded in the settlement's architecture? The surrounding environment further complicates interpretation. Porc-Epicé sits in a landscape of variable elevation, subject to seasonal rainfall, shifting vegetation, and the challenges of arid terrain. The builders would have needed to manage drainage, stability, and exposure to the elements. Did the orientation of enclosures take into account prevailing winds, sunlight, or seasonal water flow? Were certain stones chosen for thermal properties or durability? Such considerations imply a sophisticated awareness of materials and environmental cycles, integrated seamlessly into the design of the settlement. Speculative perspectives emerge when considering anomalies at the site. Some structures appear isolated, devoid of domestic debris, or aligned in patterns that defy immediate functional explanation. Could these have been ceremonial platforms, observation posts, or spatial markers for communal or astronomical purposes? The regularity of certain circular enclosures hints at deliberate repetition, perhaps guided by a sense of proportion or rhythm. Were these early humans experimenting with architectural concepts, testing ratios, alignments, or structural principles in a tactile and empirical way? Porc-Epicé also invites questions about social organization and labor. Constructing durable stone enclosures requires cooperation, planning, and skill. Were certain families or groups responsible for building, maintaining, or managing specific structures? Did the repetition of design and proportion reflect shared knowledge passed across generations? Could the settlement itself represent a microcosm of social order, with spatial arrangement reinforcing hierarchy, function, or communal cohesion? Burial evidence adds another layer of intrigue. Skeletons found within or adjacent to the stone enclosures often include items carefully placed in relation to the body: beads, carved tools, and ochre pigment. These practices suggest that architecture and ritual were intimately connected. Were the circular or rectangular forms themselves imbued with symbolic meaning, framing human life, death, and memory? Could the structures have been designed to guide movement, ritual action, or even attention toward particular natural or celestial features? Standing on the rocky terraces of Porc-Epicé today, it is possible to sense the precision and care embedded in the landscape. Each stone carefully laid, each enclosure formed, and each elevated platform hints at observation, calculation, and sustained effort. These are structures not only of necessity, but of intention, demonstrating that early humans in the Horn of Africa were capable of sophisticated spatial reasoning, combining material practicality with aesthetic and perhaps symbolic awareness. Yet, for all the clarity that stones provide, Porc-Epicé remains deeply mysterious. How were construction techniques learned and transmitted in the absence of writing? Did these communities recognize ratios, alignment, or symmetry consciously? Or were these emergent properties of practical experimentation? And, most provocatively, could the arrangement of stone enclosures represent an early understanding of proportion and spatial reasoning that resonates with the principles we later see in monumental architecture across the globe? Porc-Epicé endures as a site that straddles the boundary between utility and abstraction, labor and thought. Its stone enclosures preserve the echoes of human decision-making, observation, and intentionality. Every circle, every platform, every aligned wall invites reflection on the cognitive and cultural sophistication of prehistoric societies. And in their quiet, enduring presence, these structures ask us to consider the knowledge that may have been encoded in stone. Knowledge lost to time, yet waiting patiently beneath the arid soils of the Horn of Africa, hinting at the ingenuity, precision, and imagination of those who built them,